Welcome to episode 27 of the Coast AFL Podcast from Different Players. This week we talk about the final round of the home and away season. We finally made it 24 rounds later, and here we are on the verge of the final series. This week we talk about obviously all the teams, all the close games especially, all the blowouts, and all of the in-betweens. We said goodbye to some fan-favourite characters from a couple of teams. It's been a journey, and we're gonna dive straight into it, aren't we? So, how you doing, Mr. Cyrek?
Yeah, pretty much. And yeah, as you said, what a journey it was. Honestly, it's gonna be so weird. Like, we've had a few, I think the last decade's parody's been pretty good in the decade. Like, I know we've had a few like dynasties and all that sort of thing, but in terms of teams making the top eight, there's always a few surprises. Lesser teams are prone to upsetting top teams. And I think that's sort of encapsulated with a lot of what happened in this round of football.
It's crazy that all of Sunday's games were literally, like, granted score-wise, they weren't all down to the wire, but in terms of their
Yeah,
importance for who makes the top eight and where the top
exactly.
eight finishes overall, they were super important. And the
Yeah,
AFL could not have
one
scheduled
of
it better.
one of the benefits of scheduling that final one so late, and it is annoying because obviously, like, if you had to travel to a game, as I said, it makes it a lot harder.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, like, watching experience those three games on Sunday, and we'll talk about it a bit later, because I went to the Sunday game and there were some specifics that were absolute scenes and absolute joy to be a part of that. But yeah, as I said, three back-to-back incredible games, and I can't wait to dissect them.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I went to Richmond Gold Coast, final home and away season, home and away game for us. Um Obviously, as we're all aware now, Richmond didn't get the win. We finished wooden spooners with the number one draft pick. So, silver linings. But overall, like, despite the way the game ended, I thought it was a pretty good, like, summary of how our season has just kind of been.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure
Just
you
like,
feel. I know, like, obviously Port's playing finals, but I feel like just the way Port finished up with Freo kind of summarized how your season's kind of been as well.
yeah, exactly. I mean, as I said, I'll talk into it a bit more, but yeah, as I said, I was very proud watching that game. As I said, especially with how that last quarter played out
Mm.
with a lot for Freo on the line. Um, but yeah, as I said, it's just it's just one of those ones where every time your team makes finals, like, it's been a long time for Port, and a lot of final series that we've gone into, we haven't looked the best in the back half of the year, but there's actually a rare um, situation where the back half has actually been very strong for Port. So I am very excited, possibly optimistic, though, as a football supporter, you can never get too uh, ahead of yourself. But
Yeah, it's true.
yeah, nah, excited for finals, and Port are definitely not the only fan base wanting to be optimistic at the moment. There's a
Uh,
fair few upside for a fair few teams.
that's definitely correct. Before we jump into retirees, we want to talk about, I am just going to mention our tips. This is pretty much our final tally. 50-50 on whether we're actually going to include our finals tips in terms of our
I don't
tallies.
believe in tipping in finals.
No,
I
neither
am
do I, to be
very
honest. I don't
I'm
know if my
very
work comp is doing finals tipping. If it is, that means I might have a chance in winning some money still. But if not, this is where we end up. Myself on 138 and Sarek on 130. We overtook each other a couple of times. Sadly, neither of us actually won the friend comp that we're both in. Um,
mm,
Congratulations to Soof for winning that first time
good,
for him.
good fan, good
Good
doggy
lad.
supporter. Yeah, exactly. I love
And
it.
yeah, looking forward to tipping next season. It's going to be a lot more competitive.
Oh, I tell you what, if it's as head scratching as this season, I don't know if I've got the mental wherewithal, but we'll see how it go. We'll see how we go.
We shall take a pot shot at it, I'm sure. All right, let's
I'm
jump
sure.
over to retirees for the week that we're going to discuss. I'm going to talk about the big three that were announced over the week, and that's starting with Ben Brown.
Yeah, very, very much a Ooh, how do you say it? Would you say cult status?
I would say
Sort of.
he was a cult player because he
Yeah,
was he was
exactly.
known primarily for his massive run up.
Massive run up, and being Tasmanian. We love a good Tasmanian playing football.
Hmm.
Picked at round 3, pick 47 in the 2013 national draft by the North Melbourne. Was sort of the speculative, or maybe even like depth option pick. I'm testing my knowledge. I think they've already drafted Mason Wood by this point. Starting to focus a bit on him, being the next tall key forward. Obviously, at that point, I still think they had like Jared Waite and ooh, who else they have in
They
that
still had a
forward
lot of
line?
their veteran talent that was
Exactly,
eventually through.
exactly. So
So like,
basically,
they
he
still
was
had Del
picked.
Santo, they still had Boomer, they still had like
Yeah,
everyone of note.
exactly. But yeah, so what I was saying is picked a bit speculatively, trying converting, and you know what? He pretty much delivered. And I think his best period of the time, 2017 to 2019, where he kicked 60 straight goals for 3 years. 63 in 27, 2018 61, 2019 64. Pretty much always just short of that elusive goal kickers medal, Coleman.
The Coleman.
Um, yeah, including that time in who was it? I think it was like 2019 or 2017, or I can't remember. And like Lance Franklin or something kicked 10 in like the final game to overtake him. It was
Uh,
something ridiculous like
yeah,
that.
I know in one of those years, I think it might have been 2018 was when Rewalt kicked 10 against the Gold Coast and won it.
Oh, maybe it was that actually. That
But
does ring a bell. So.
that wasn't a final round game though. So there was definitely one where
Mm.
Body did that though.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, so what I'm saying, absolutely in it. Unfortunately, 2019, he gets injured. Oh no, 2020 gets injured. I can't quite remember. And just fell out of favour at the Kangaroos. His goal kicking slightly dropped off, but I think it was always a bit questionable, dropping him so quickly from
Mhm.
what he was able to produce. Obviously, when you got a key forward with health issues, you can get a bit tentative as a fan. Well, as a um, what do you call it? List management group.
Mhm.
So he goes to the Demons, and he was an important part for 2 years. His production wasn't quite as high um, as was at the Kangaroos, but what he was able to do was provide the Demons with a tall target, which they needed to win that 2021 Premiership. Um, honestly, I won't say they won't win the Premiership flag without him, but it definitely was a key point. After that, a bit flaky. I mean, his form slightly dropped off, plus a few injuries. He was always an option, but as I said, Melbourne just, they just had forward line troubles of their own. And yeah, just sort of finished out as a very respectable player in the league. Was the games 175 games, um, and 360 goals. And yeah, I'll just say he was a very good contested mark.
Mhm.
Um, he was an excellent shot on goal, that long run up. Okay, he had like a few moments of the yips, but for most of all, he was running near 2-on-1 in terms of goal kicking. 2 goals to one behind, I should mean. But yeah, a fantastic player.
Yep, I agree. One thing to note, back during his time at North Melbourne, is that apart from back when there were only 23 rounds, and we had the bye directly in the middle. From 2015 to 2019, he did not miss a single game.
Yeah, no, as I said, that was
That's
it was so
110,
weird to
pretty much
me at the
110
time.
straight games ish.
Yeah, that such a reliable player would get dropped so quickly at the Kangaroos. But as we all know, they had some weird list management decisions at the time. Unfortunately, like in hindsight, I think they lucked into the correct move.
Mm.
Um, But I definitely think Ben Brown should have got more support from his output than he got in that period of time.
Absolutely. And yeah, like he overall, I mean, premiership has always been the ultimate goal for every player. He managed to achieve that. So can't complain. As much as I'm sure he would have loved to at least played a lot more footy, um,
Mm.
can't complain too much that at least he got to achieve the ultimate goal.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, so and it's an interesting little note. He also was a representative for the International Rules Series in 2017,
Vaguely remember that.
which not many.
Also,
It's not really noted for many players. It's not exactly a
yeah,
thing we do anymore.
yeah. And I will say, I think he had one 10-goal hole, and I believe, if my memory serves me correct, well, sorry, memory serves me correct, it's the 10-goal hole. He might have had another, I'm not sure, but it was against Port.
It was against Port. You are
When
correct.
North
I
Melbourne
just found it.
absolutely thrashed Port when they were looking to go well. They go to the Kangaroos, who were starting to wane, and get their ass kicked.
Yeah.
I was out at the time. I look at my phone and I just see Ben Brown kicks 10, Porter a bunch of pretenders. Yeah, it's one I don't remember fondly and I didn't see, but you know what? I had a bit of a smile when I saw Ben Brown kick 10. I do love the fella.
Yeah. It was round 22, 2019 was when it happened.
Yeah.
It was
Uh,
clearly a very dominant game from him.
Yeah, I think Port would go on either to just miss finals that year, or I don't know. It was a very in between season for them. But yeah, that doesn't matter. Ben Brown, you know, um, stuck to it in transition, and then got his reward switching club.
Yeah,
Respectable career.
absolutely. All right, let's move on to one of the heart and souls of North Melbourne for a time. One club player, right? One club player, two club player.
Think about Hawthorn
Oh yeah, he did
premiership
start at Hawthorn.
years.
That's right. Sorry, Liam Shiels. I forgot that he
Liam
started at
Shields.
Hawthorn, but he ended up pretty much becoming the
Uh,
heart and soul of North Melbourne for a while. He really stood tall for them when things were hard.
um, yeah, well, kind of. Look, I think you got your timelines a tiny bit mixed up because it was more tail end of the career. I think he went over there at about 2020. So this was about when he was 30 years old.
Actually, no. Yeah, I was very,
After.
very incorrect. That's fine.
Yeah, no, it's all right.
He did end
But
up kind of representing them very well in the brief period.
you know what? As I said, in a period of time when North needed leadership, he was the one player where I actually sort of understood North Melbourne recruiting. Um, I'm looking at Hawthorn's current list. Yeah, but as I said, but in terms of what he was able to do in the Hawthorn Premiership side, he was probably one of the more aggressive Hawthorn playing players at that club because Hawthorn, they were known for that locking press. They bullied you with pressure in that Hawthorn, flooded the zone. And they've got a lot of players that would like neatly dissect the ball. Luke Hodge, Sam Mitchell. But one of the underrated thing was Liam Shiels on the wing. If he got the ball, you were too focused on the corridor. He would burst out to the wings. He was one of the leading kickers inside 50 for a while. Beside other good wingers at the time like Brad Hill, Stephen Hill, maybe even Daniel Pearce was
Mm-hmm.
up there for a while. Yeah, and as I said, he was just as classy as some of the others in that squad. And yeah, as I said, his score involvements. Obviously, he had a selection of brilliant players to pass to. The tail end of Buddy's career, the probably the prime of Roughhead's career,
Mm-hmm.
Gunston, the other small dude, Bruce.
Bruce.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, as I said, yeah, I think I'm not sure he played all three premierships. I think he was injured for one of them, but he might be
I
triple.
don't know. I can't seem to find. All it says on his profile is that he featured in the Premiership years, but it doesn't say that he played in the
Yeah.
sides. So I don't actually
Okay.
know.
Yeah, but yeah, as I said, really important for those anyway. And, as I said, goes to North Melbourne, sort of has, a as I alluded to, a bit more of a development role.
Mhm.
This year is actually one of the few years where he's played a full year, I would say, at North Melbourne Kangaroos. Um, and yeah, as I said, it's just in a team that sort of needed a bit of consistency. It's had a lot of chopping and changing in its list. Yeah, Liam Shiels was at least someone consistent and older that they can rely on. And yeah, as I said, he was picked up in the uh, yeah, what do you call it? The supplemental
Yes,
recruit period.
that's correct.
Yeah. I also forgot to mention he was round 2, pick 34 in the national draft in 2008.
Correct.
Yeah. So, yeah. So he played 17 games this year. He, in terms of career, he's played
288 games. Very close to
288
300, which is
games.
really unlucky.
Mm, and yeah, as I said, average a pretty healthy 20 odd disposals in the Hawthorn prime. So from about 2014 and 2020, goes to the Kangaroos in 2023 once the Hawks delisted him because obviously they were transitioning into youth.
Maybe there was a bit of bad blood between him and Sam Mitchell. Who knows?
Got no idea there. I vaguely remember something or other. And then, yeah, 2 years at the Kangaroos. You know, reasonable enough. This year's not as impressive as last year. It was a bit more solid. And yeah, as I said, like often good wingers, he was very fast, but he also had a lot of tackling pressure.
Mm-hmm.
He had the 8th total tackles inside 50 in 2015, and he was always ranked pretty high in most years. So, while he was that uncontested wing style player, he definitely had that Hawthorn edge, embedded into his culture. And as we said, if you've got a good tackling winger, it can make transition all that much more harder for teams. So, good player, runs both ways, very aggressive, involved in a lot of score involvements, but also had that defensive side to his game.
Absolutely. And you look at his 2015 stats, for an example, he had 162 tackles that year, which is the most in his career, which is a massive amount. And in total, 1,560. And also 26 hitouts. Sometimes did a little pitch in.
I guess when, maybe Rufford's a bit slow, you're on the wing, you say, I'll take it myself.
Yeah, why not? I'll step in if you need.
Exactly.
Let the Sean Grigg kind of rock roll.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I never thought Shiels was that tall.
184. It's not
184. That's not that bad, actually. I would have guessed like 178 or something. So, yeah, sorry, Liam Shiels. Didn't mean to do you dirty.
Didn't mean to insult your height.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, as I said, pretty stellar career, honestly.
Yeah.
He's just, a stalwart sort of player, but also that fit breeder winger that we see in popular football that runs both ways, but also has enough aggressive style to them, to always make sure that that scoreboard is ticking over when you get that transition on the wing.
Absolutely. All right, and last one to roll off the retirees for the week that we want to talk about is my boy Dylan Grimes. I'll be honest, this was the one who hurt me the hardest out of the Richmond retirees, because out of our backline trio being Alex Rance, David Asprey, and Dylan Grimes, Grimey was always my favorite. So seeing him retire does hurt a bit, especially because we didn't ever get like a proper farewell game for him, because he's had I think 2 surgeries this season alone just to try and get him back on the park, and it just wasn't going to happen. And to his credit, he early in his career, a few people would probably remember this, he was injury prone to all hell. Like his hamstrings were just really, really bad. They barely stay on the bone. And it wasn't until he went overseas for some experimental surgery that seemed to work. Was he able to actually
Yeah,
get a
because
consistent season, and then became incredibly important to our backline and led us to what was one of the very key reasons that we had success.
yeah, so to that point, 2020, 2010 debut year, 1 game. 2011, 7 games. 2012, 9 games. 2013, 9 games. And then until this year, he stayed in the double digits. Um, yeah, as you were saying, once he got his body right, he turned into a very core second player for that Richmond. Sorry, second defender for that Richmond
Yeah,
Premiership.
because
And not saying second as in second in talent.
no, like he would always
Um,
take the second forward.
yeah, exactly. You
Because
know,
Rance
as I
would always
said,
take the
that
first, and
tandem.
Asprey would always take the third. That's
Yeah,
how the structure works. Yeah. But yeah, like
exactly.
as
And
you can see here on the screen, if you're watching the YouTube format, there are his numbers for the games he has played. With 25 in 2017, which I believe is almost every single game, including finals, off the top of my head.
yes,
I think you
yes.
let's see. So it was 3 games for the final series because we had the double chance. So we played qualifier, prelim, grand final. So it's 3 games. Actually, that might be every single game because I think it was still 23 games that season. So it would have been the bye
I
halfway
think
in the
so.
year, and then um missing second round of finals. So that was literally every single game in the 2017 season.
Yeah. Also
That's
played every single one of 2023, considering the Tigers didn't make finals.
correct. Was it 24 games last season, or was it still 23?
I thought it was 22. I thought it's only just changed to 20. I don't know. I can't
I
do
can't
math.
remember because it's 23 plus a bye round. But I think we already changed the bye rounds to be scattered at that point, so I don't remember.
Yeah. Anyway,
Anyway, it's a lot of games.
point is, body right, yeah. 234 for what was an injury-prone player. And
Yeah,
not even one that was a particularly high draft pick. He was picked 2, but in the 2009 preseason draft by Richmond. So,
it wasn't even
um,
the initial draft period.
exactly. So diamond in the rough, really.
Yeah, and like he's from the Victorian northern suburbs. He's up in from the Hurstbridge sort of area. Now lives in the Macedon Ranges, owns a winery, and most people are aware of at this point. One little fact that I love about him is that he has 3 goals to his name.
Yeah,
Because I think for
just
most of our defenders were originally like brought on as forwards, and we
yeah.
somehow just mold them into the back line.
Yeah, I mean, it's what you do with failed forwards these days. You know, just be like, okay, you know how you are like failing to, get leads because you're stuck on, just do the same to other people.
Yeah, pretty much.
And yeah,
And then just to run through his honors: best and fairest winner 2021, third best and fairest 2019, All Australian 2019, All Australian nominee in 2018 and 2020, NAB AFL Rising Star nominee in 2012, obviously winning all 3 premierships in 17, 19, and 20, and co-captain from 2022 to 2023.
mhm.
So very successful career. Um, Tried to make it to 250. Unfortunately, didn't happen, which is very
Yeah,
sad. But we would not. Granted, I can say the same about all of our Premiership players, but like we wouldn't be where we ended up, after 2020 if it wasn't for Dylan Grimes.
yeah,
Absolutely, like heart
absolutely.
and soul player. Played his heart out every single game that he was in.
Mm. And I will say, and we've talked about a lot of, you especially, about interception game and how, that was a key part of Richmond. But
Mm-hmm.
you can't do that unless you really trust your backcourt because as we all know, like if you go for an intercept and you get it wrong, you normally leave a player 3,
Mm-hmm.
you get the ball exposed inside 50, and that's when you really got to rely on your one-on-one defenders to hold the fort. Because, yeah, as I said, sometimes the teams just get it free you. So,
Yeah, and
you know,
that's right, and that's like, and I've talked about this at length like this season. That's part of why we struggled so bad, apart from our injuries, is that our backline was never solidified because of all of our
mm,
injuries. So players like Vlosten, who became our intercept defender, just couldn't do that anymore.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
but
Um,
yeah, on Dylan Grimes himself, very successful career outside of injuries, and it's very sad to see him go. But now is a time of transition for us, and it was gonna have to
yeah,
happen.
exactly. No,
Um,
for sure. As I said, it's
it is what
it's
it is.
so rare to get one premiership as a player. He's got three. So, as I said, I mean, hell, 200 games plus is like what? Probably going to be what? Point or maybe 1% of the AFL? Probably even less, really. Um,
Uh,
it wouldn't be
I would say at
many.
least like 230 plus would be about 1%. I think there's a fair amount that make 200 nowadays.
Oh, I mean, look, the average games played by an AFL player is less than 10. Like, there's a lot of players that just
Oh
come
yeah,
into
there
the
are a lot of
system
players
never
that
to.
just don't make it through the system. But
Yeah, so, as I said, I think I've seen the stat and it's like low. I'm not sure if it's even one digit or not, but it's, yeah. So head off to Dylan Grimes. Absolutely fantastic career and deserves to sail off into the sunsets as the Tigers enter a new era.
absolutely. Speaking of, I probably should talk about this a bit later, but I'm going to talk about it now since we're on a new era for Richmond. Our new CEO was announced. I've already forgotten
Hey,
his name, but I welcome him in with open arms, and hopefully he has similar impact that Brendan Gale has had now that Benny Gale is going down to Tasmania. Um, so
has he announced 6 premierships in 10 years?
I hope so. That'd be great. So I salute thee. All right, let's
uh,
jump into the games themselves. Now that round 24 and the home and away season has come to a close. You
it
have
has.
Friday night's game of Melbourne v Collingwood.
Yes, and we'll try and just get through some of the earlier round footballs. AFL scheduled some of the dead rubbers early, and while this wasn't technically, this was like possibly going to be a game back when they scheduled it, not to be, as apart from possible match interference by Zeus, Thor, Mamarajaran, or whatever thunder god you believe in, there was not much interest to note in this game. Apart from maybe the fact it was also Razor Ray's last game,
Mm-hmm.
farewell to thee. Collingwood would put some excitement on early, as Melbourne would absolutely refuse to pressure the Pies in any meaningful way. They were on head for the 100-point margin that might make this game interesting, because if they did that, they would only need another team to lose by 100 to get into the finals, but not to be. Notably, the Dacos boys were left unchecked, which was an interesting decision, and Bobby Hill and Will Hoskin Elliott enjoying playing against a May and leaverless Demon defense. I
Can
think
I
May was the laid out.
interject just for a second?
Yeah.
So I completely forgot that Friday night's game was Razor Ray's last game. So I
Oh,
just brought
yeah.
up a little bit of a table of how many games he umpired, including
Yeah.
finals and grand finals. So he umpired for 20 seasons, starting in 2004, umpiring for 389 games, um, including 31 finals and 3 grand finals, being the 2010 and 2010 replay in 2010 and the 2019 grand final as well.
Mhm.
So, yeah, we salute thee for your hard work and long
Yeah.
service to the game.
Oh, yeah, I was actually going to mention a bit more on Ray at the end. But yeah, no, as I said, absolutely class. But again, I'll talk about a bit at the end. Some of the Demons players would lift. Yeah, but as I said, inaccuracy by Collingwood would prevent this game from reaching any meaningful conclusion,
Mm-hmm.
as they would have needed an unprecedented miracle to make the finals. They won 8-9, 57 to 15, 13, 103. It would be hard to argue. I know there's a lot of focus on Brownlow votes at this final game of the season because it's the nail biter, and it will be hard not to give Dacos, Nick, of course, 3 Brownlow votes in what should maybe be an interesting Charlie contest this year. 40 disposals, 78% efficiency, 11 marks, 9 clearances, 10 inside 50s, 11 score involvements, 2 goals and 1 behind.
Mm-hmm.
Time is one thing you cannot afford a Dacos, and Einstein would probably have to change his theory of relativity if he saw how slow the Ds were moving compared to Nick Dacos himself. I also should say Joshua Halfback had 40, 10 marks, 7 score involvements. And big man Lipinski, making it 3 players in the black and white. They got 30 plus disposals and 10 marks with his 30 disposal, 12 marks, 6 intercepts, 8 score involvement, and 2 goal game.
That would have been a good multi to put on.
I meant, look, as I said, I think I want to just highlight how little pressure Melbourne were putting on. Also, another thing, Collingwood smashed the marks inside 50, 21-8. Bobby Hill, Will Hoskin, Jamie Elliott, and Cameron, all taking advantage of this. And for 2023, Collingwood will be ecstatic that Will Parker, Edward Allen, and Joe Richards, assuming he stays, all had great outings, with Allen's 21 disposals, 9 score involvements, and 1 goal game being fairly notable. That's about probably all I'm going to say about the individual performance. I will want to give a shout out to Steel Sidebottom. He absolutely shut down Viney this game. The last standing Melbourne midfielder got absolutely put out the game, and Steele is turning into a bit of a veteran tagger. Again, favouring the captain his old age. And yeah, as I said, Melbourne had some good players. Gordon Cameron sort of had a very nullified ruck battle, but Cameron was good around the ground, so you can't really give Gorn the nod there. And Cozzy Pickett, he had 2 goals, 2 with 8 score involvements, but a loose elbow we'll see him suspended at the start of 25, hitting more with a bump on the head after narrowly avoiding to do so in the quarter earlier. So he had 2 loose elbows, one hit, one the other one sort of hit but didn't make any concussive contact. So he was just floating with danger. And yeah, as I said, no real impact from this game. Melbourne's biggest worry is probably that final impression of the 2024 season being this game, after having, already worries that players are going to leave.
It's already confirmed that they're going to lose at least one player, with Neil Bullen going back home.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as I said, tiny bit different because that's just homesickness. Maybe club culture has something to do with it. But as I said, he's had a good run at Melbourne. And yeah, as I said, he can go home for the final few years of his career.
Yeah.
I say final 3 years. I think it's 29 or something.
He's getting close.
That old, but well, I say that being 29 myself. I want hope for me yet. Yeah, as I said, as for Collingwood, happy that there are some positives to bring next year. 13 win equivalent, 103% season. Is the best season ever not to make a finals. So no other club has done that on a 13 equivalent win season. Technically they had 2 draws, but it's whatever 4 times 13 is. So their season, and we'll talk about it a bit later, was the complete positional lapses. Sometimes the defense went missing, sometimes the forward line became non-functional, and I think that's sort of why they sat on the very mediocre 103%. Because while you can say they're unlucky to miss finals, they definitely have a bit to work on. This was definitely not the best flag defense ever. A bit like Geelong last year, it's not irredeemable. But yeah, as I said, it's pretty much just focusing on the kids, I would say. Because there was enough players that showed enough, as I said, in this game and the others. But yeah, as I said, they're just, it's not quite a rebuild. I don't think they'll stay down for long. They might be in the mix next year, but it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think similar to Richmond's kind of standings, I think a lot of injuries definitely played their part in how Collingwood, especially the later half of the season. Kind of structured.
Well, it started in the middle, but they did okay, and then it just sort of caught up to them.
Yeah, because a lot of it was mostly like Degoe. Like he was their main one that was always out, and then it just kind of people just started folding here and there, and then
Yeah.
as they started pushing like round 19, 20, they started getting everyone back and made a genuine
Yeah.
attempt. So I
Yeah,
think in the
because it was
grand scheme
solid.
of things for Collingwood,
Collingwood.
it's probably seen as a failure considering they were premiers last season. But
Yeah.
you can't fault them for how much they tried in getting back there.
Yeah, it was never an effort thing. As I said, it just felt like a bit of a systematic, a flop, maybe. Whether that comes to just the stars becoming a bit different. You can't just rely on defense because there's so many good offensive-based teams,
Mm-hmm.
that Collingwood couldn't just hold up to snuff, or whether, as I said, it's somewhere in between, where they tried to do that, but with the tools that they had in the shed, weren't able to quite pull it off. But, yeah, as I said, yeah, they'll have a few things to work on. They won't have their first round draft pick this year. They gave that up for Schultz, who,
Mm-hmm.
I think he actually had a solid game, this game. But, as I said, a very middle of the road year.
Which,
Um,
funnily
yeah.
enough, that first round draft pick that Freo now have could end up going to Richmond if they want Bolton.
Yeah, no, exactly. Free have a bit of draft capital to work with, so I think they have a couple of first rounders and a second. But yeah, as I said, so they'll figure
Or
something
Baker
out.
for that fact. They want both of them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, as I said, they've got the flexibility. Um, but yeah, as I said, in terms of Collingwood, yeah, I think they'll probably look on recruiting as they normally do. When
Mm.
you're Collingwood, you get that pull. So, but again, we'll talk a bit more about that later. But
Well,
yeah, as I
that'll
said, in
probably be
terms of
more of
this game,
like a next week sort of conversation.
yeah, yeah, exactly. But as I said, unless you have anything to finish with this game, probably just like to have a final few thoughts on Razor Road.
Um, I do want to mention that if you're watching the Fox Footy interviews, post game for this match, Steel Sidebottom was interviewed, and he did kind of mention the fact that he has signed on for one more season, even though it's not publicly
Okay.
announced yet by the club.
Yeah.
So good on him because he's in great form, and I definitely think that's something
Oh,
that
absolutely.
he's definitely like a very much a necessary player at this point in time. Him and Pendles, even though Pendles is here and there sometimes. They're both still giving
Yeah.
them their all despite being
I,
the
I, I
veterans.
think for both of those, yeah, utility is probably the best thing for them because, as I said, they've got. Oh, look, as I said, their gap in their list between their older and their younger players can be a bit variable at times. So yeah, just having those constants, I think they still need that because, as I said, they're not fully rebuilding. But
Yeah,
again, we'll touch on a bit more that next week.
absolutely. And then yeah, for Melbourne, there is a lot that needs fixing at Melbourne. We'll probably talk more in depth about that next week. And then for
Um,
Ray, I just
yeah,
want to say thank you. Like, granted, everyone has issues with umpires. People have always had issues with
hmm,
Razor Ray, but umpiring is a hard as hell job to do,
yeah,
and I think he did it with as much honesty that an umpire can give to the game. Probably a little bit of bias to some clubs because that's just how it is sometimes. Um, like all umpires have some sort of degree of bias, not that it's ever really noticeable.
yeah. Look, as I said, it's like one of those things that yeah, it exists, but it's like I don't really think I'm gonna say like one thing I will say about Ray is that in a big moment, he was not afraid to make a call
Absolutely.
if he genuinely believed it. Whether it be like an out of bounds deliberate late in the game that
Oh, there were a
75%
few of
of
those.
umpires, it just wouldn't pay. If he thought it was deliberate, he was swinging that arm, he was saying, get that out of here. And you know what? Also underrated was the amount of communication.
Hmm.
Honestly, some of the best sound bits in the game, whether it be um, what was it? Stop talking to me, Devon.
It's something like
Devon
that.
Smith.
To Devon Smith.
Yeah, or that's not how we talk to people around here. To I forgot it was a Sydney player against Port, I think. But you know what? He just had that like humor to him to always be able to diffuse the situation whenever he went on radio.
And I
He would
think
be one of the
I think that's something that the game is going to miss because it seems like the other umpires don't have that sort of character that he did.
No, because it takes a lot of mental energy to be an umpire. You know, as I said, you constantly have to question your own decisions, but you also have to be confident enough to where you make decisions so consistently. So, you know, as I said, I always respect Razor Ray from not only doing that, but going to the media straight after whenever they have those questions and it's like, yeah, this is what we saw. Um, Even though it may or may not have been the right call, I can see why the umpires called this, or even though this decision seems worse than it is, on the umpiring rules that we're fed, we have to call it this way. And, you know, as I said, if I think they're missing a missing a beat if they don't have him in some sort of full-time or part-time, media role, because again, absolutely great personality for the game, honest, true to himself, and being an umpire at his age, pretty dang fit. His back gave out on him. Unfortunately, that prevented him from umpiring finals from about 2021, 2022 onwards, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so you know, yeah, glad to see him off. Oh no, yeah, sorry, that sounds a bit bad, but
Glad
you know,
that he's had a
as I said,
fruitful
hopefully we
career.
won't see the last of him. Yeah, exactly. I said I always had a soft spot for him.
All right. I believe we shall now move on. Hang on. Okay, sorry, my PC was being a bit weird for a second there. I believe we shall now move on to Tasmania for
Yeah.
Hawthorn v North Melbourne. This will be a pretty quick game because it was an absolute blowout, as everyone was expecting. Kind of a dead rubber in terms of top 8 because Hawthorn were pretty convincingly going to take a spot within the 8. Like, I don't think anyone had any faults about that. But in terms of the bottom 2 positions, the more the Hawthorn scored against North Melbourne, the more of a chance it was that Richmond could have avoided finishing 18th, because the percentage was just dropping and dropping and dropping to the point where it was pretty much dead even. I believe, and we'll look about it when we bring up the ladder later, but I'm pretty sure, apart from the 4 premiership points that stopped Richmond from jumping to 17th, it was a 0.1% of margin difference.
0.2 is the final.
Okay, there you go. I was close enough.
Richmond
I knew
were
it was
actually
0.1 at
ahead.
one point.
Richmond are ahead of North Melbourne in the final percentage.
There you go. Like, it was all about those 4 points, and we could have not finished 18th. But, you know, it is what it is. But back to the Tasmania game, Hawthorn absolutely demolished North Melbourne. Final scoreline was 26-14, 170 to 7-4-46. Brilliant game at in Launceston. The time slot for this was moved, and so was the Richmond game as well, due to a power strike in Tasmania. I believe it's union related. And the AFL didn't want to risk not having power to the stadium if a strike was going to happen later in the night, so they moved the game forward. And granted, I don't think it would have made any sort of difference to the final score, but it was just worth mentioning. So I'll just rattle off the players that stood out. Not that we really have much to talk about. But without Will Day, who's still recovering and hopefully in time for finals, Jai Newcomb has stepped up massively in the midfield. He finished with 35 touches at 88.6%, efficiency, 11 contested possessions, 6 inside 50s, 10 clearances, 4 goal assists, 15 score involvements, 12 pressure acts, and a goal himself. Dylan Moore was very key up forward, kicking 4-3 from 12 disposals, 9 contested possessions, 3 clearances, 11 score involvements, 8 tackles. I believe most of those were inside 50. 21 pressure acts, and 3 1%ers. And then Captain James Sicily, of course, another standout game for him. He finished with 24 disposals at 70.8% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 8 intercept possessions, 7 marks, 5 inside 50s, 8 score involvements, 2-1 himself, and 662 meters gained. So, as you can pretty much see, Hawthorn are absolutely primed to make a play for a finals against the Doggies in 2 weeks. That remains to be seen how that's going to go, because both teams are in great form. But to North Melbourne's credit, they had a couple of players who did stand tall. Captain Jai Simpkin, of course, he gave it pretty much his all, left everything on the field. He finished with 25 touches, 10 contested possessions, 5 clearances, 4 score involvements, 9 tackles, 25 pressure acts, and a 3-1 scoreline, which is his career high in goals in a match. I believe his second highest was at least like 2-2 or something like that.
Yeah.
So getting 3 goals for him is a personal achievement. Congratulations to him. And then Tristan Sherry, my personal All-Australian ruckman, which also we will find out this week what the All-Australian looks like. So okay. I'm very much looking forward to talking about that next week.
Yeah.
He was pretty much just another midfielder rather than being a ruck. He finished with 35 hitouts, 6 to advantage, 25 disposals, 18 contested possessions, 13 clearances, which was the highest of the match, 4 score involvements, and 13 pressure acts. So,
yeah,
for North Melbourne, we kind of expected this. All season long, they've been up and down with only some players standing up, but it's been a very hard season for them. So, can't really say too much on that. It's just there is some good signs. You just gotta hope that they make some key changes in the off season, and it hopefully pushes them in towards like a middle of the pack sort of team.
Yeah, well, we said at the start of the year, defense was always going to be their bane.
Mm-hmm.
In the back half, they did manage to patch that up a tiny bit, but I mean, this is where it just all sort of falls apart, isn't it? 26-14 kicked against you. Yeah. Nah, I said you're right. It's not much to say. It's a bit more than just the backline personnel. It's their midfield structure. And as I said, and yeah, we mentioned scoring. They can do it if they can connect between midfield and the forward line.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that's always a bit iffy. But yeah, as I said, it's just again when you get beaten by almost 100 disposals, and you lose the intercept count 71-64. It just really shows that one team's working a lot harder to try and get the ball back than the other. So, yeah, in the general field of play, North Melbourne just aren't enough, really.
No,
and we'll talk about it a bit more.
And it's very day and night when it comes to these top 8 teams.
Yeah, exactly.
And even against some like middle of the pack teams, like even against St Kilda, it was fairly day and night, for example.
Yeah, and then as I said, they had that magnificent game against Collingwood, which they, for old money should have won.
They absolutely should have won that.
But yeah, as I said, you're right. As for Hawthorn, as I said, it's a flogging against one of the worst teams in the AFL at the moment. But to do it so convincingly, and especially that last quarter, like that was ruthless.
Absolutely.
Like I watched the highlights of it because I was just wondering how on earth they managed to get so many goals, but they were picking the carcass at that point. So, they sent a message, to the doggies, and especially since it is going to be a Victoria matchup, it'll be fairly even keel in terms of advantages. It'll just be, as you say, 2 of the form teams going at it.
Pretty much, and honestly, and we'll talk about this like later as well as probably next week as well. But my personal opinion, whoever wins Doggies Hawthorn is likely going to go all the way because they are the 2 best informed teams in the entire competition. Granted, like
I have a few reservations about that.
There's probably like 4 as a whole that that are in that group, probably being Port Adelaide and Geelong or the Giants. My personal opinion. Brisbane, we'll talk about that a bit later. But I truly believe that either of these 2 teams will at least make it to a prelim, guaranteed.
Well, I said one of the good thing about conflicting opinions is that we will see once this final series is up and about. But
true,
I definitely can see for Hawthorn. I actually much more agree for Hawthorn than I do the Western Bulldogs. But we will see.
Mm-hmm. And then
Bulldogs have played some terrific games.
Oh yeah, for sure. And then just to finish up this game, a couple of injuries, unfortunately. Connor Nash, leg injury. I don't think either of these 2 leg injuries that I'm about to mention are ACLs, thankfully. I think they're just like corkies or something like that. But hopefully he'll be back for finals because he's a very important player for them. And then for Jackson Archer as well, the young superstar of North Melbourne. Thankfully, again, not an ACL, so it's not too bad. But at least he has the off season to fully recover and have a decent preseason.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. I believe you have the next game, just because it's going to be easy to go back and forth.
Yep. And honestly, it was going to be a demolition for the history books if the first half continued on. Um, as you probably heard, they had a 100-point lead at halftime. This is the Cats over West Coast at Gardenia.
Ah,
Sorry
yeah.
for forgetting to introduce. As I said, 100-point lead at halftime. They kept the Eagles to just 2-2. They made Witch's Hat look like lockdown pressure players, and Cameron kicked 7 in the half, as he would have poor Ruben Gibney with fledgling support in this undersized, underbodied defensive lineup, and Ollie Henry would have 3 goals too. To make things even worse, Brady Hoff, probably the Eagles' third best defender, was subbed out. Um, uh, probably their fourth best one-on-one defender, third best defender.
Mm-hmm.
And all that was left that was a recognised key defensive player was Harry Edwards, who we've mentioned sometime on the podcast. He's a trier, but he's definitely a young player that floats in and out of being bodied in that, Eagles defense.
Mm-hmm.
And, as I said, it wasn't just that one-on-one defense. Eagles would leak 45 points from clearance in this half, and they looked dead on arrival. This was going to be an absolute smashing. But to give the Eagles credit, they did turn it around in that second half, made it look almost respectable. I will say that first half was inexcusable. It doesn't make up for it. But as a coach, you are at least glad, especially with some of the players that we're going to talk about that lifted, that they were able to maintain control as they actually won the second half and kept the margin under 100. Those young players, mixed bag of players. Jack Hutchinson, the mid-season pickup for the Eagles,
Mm-hmm.
Jaden Hunt, the veteran winger, and Harley Harlison Reid absolutely lifted as the Eagles would put on more pressure and actually created intercepts, something rarely seen in the first half, as Geelong were looking to overtake Port on percentage at this time to claim a shot for second to only just overtaking the Giants and needing Port to lose around 20 to 30 games, as they would record 20, 30 points, as they would record a still terrific 93-point final margin, with the final score being 26-12, 168 to 11-9, 75. And although the next Eagles coach will have to figure out how to close these gaps between the Eagles' best and worst footy, we talked about that the same with North, they still this year managed to avoid that triple-digit margin, which is at least, again, some improvement, which I should say is a pretty low bar from last year. When you got all their players missing, you would expect them to be a bit better this year. And at least there's some signs that they have. But yeah, as I said, very mixed bag this game. In terms of the individual performances for Geelong, I'm going to keep the stats performance to a 3 just for brevity because this is a vlogging. Big Jezza was easily best on ground. 14 disposals and 14 score involvements. I love those equalnesses.
We do.
11 shots for 9 goals, 1. A staggering 9 marks inside 50. He didn't need to play up. He was going into defense at some points of the season, playing on the wing.
Mm-hmm.
This was him having an absolute blast, just playing as a pure forward. Imagine you in most likely his final game as $1 million man contract. That is Jack Bowes, referencing the fact that former Suns player. He racked up 24 possessions from halfback with 92% efficiency. He got 6 clearances, 5 tackles, and 12 score involvements.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, in our year of the football gods, 2024, we have another standout Reece Stanley game. Look, he took advantage of the Civ Centre for the Eagles. He just beat Williams in hit-out percentage and hit-outs to advantage with 14. But he also had 12 score involvement. 8 of those score chains started from his own possession. They're called launch chains, but he directed a lot of score. He also kicked 2 goals, took 5 marks, and had 12 pressure acts.
Mm-hmm.
Just listing off the rest of the performers because, there were a lot of good players. Holmes, Danger, Big Clubs, Jack Henry, who took 7 intercept marks. Ollie Henry, who took 7 marks inside 50, which I find kind of cool. Bit of parallels there. And also he kicked 4 goals for Ollie Henry. And Shannon Neal. And for the Eagles, who I haven't mentioned, Waterman, he was presenting good as a forward option. Even in the first half, when the Eagles were floundering, and finished with 10 score involvements and 2 goal too. And I will give a shout out for Tom Cole because he did try hard in that back line. They were getting absolutely pumped, and he was trying to generate well off halfback. I think probably at least in the top 3 Eagles players for the game. And yeah, as I said, the players I mentioned earlier in Hutchinson, Hunt, and Harley Reid all had great games. Look, again, it's against the Eagles, but like Hawthorn, Geelong took some really good offensive forms into finals, rebounding from that fade out that was last week. They had some they will have some selection questions. Again, we'll talk about a bit more next week, but both veterans Hawkins and Rowan will become available. But from this game, you would say that there's no real options to take out, as Neil on form should not get dropped. That's Shannon Neal, the toll. They would like Lockie Neal as well, but unfortunately he plays for Brisbane. And yeah, as I said, so we'll decide we'll see in the next couple of weeks what they may do with all 4 of their tolls. But absolutely great problem to have. As for the Eagles, the halftime resurgence, as I say, prevented complete embarrassment. But I will say, if the Eagles are going to lose Barris in this offseason, they best hope they invest in another key defender, or at least pay a witch doctor to keep McGovern healthy forever. As, yeah, he is going to need to be vital in his twilight years to organise these up-and-coming defenders. He proved solid in patches, but I think you can probably agree they're about 2 or 3 years away from becoming a reliable core group. You know, you got Tom Cole, who's pushing up in age. He'll be a solid contributor, you would hope, for a while. But, you know, as we've been saying, young Hoff, Harry Edwards, they're probably going to decide if they keep Rotham. They're probably going to decide if they keep Witherden. I would say one of those 2 are probably going to get dropped and they'll invest in another. But, yeah, as I said, it's going to be a bit exposed. And if this game's anything to go by, they might have a North 2024 year in 2025. But an off season is a long time in football. We'll see what they do. But yeah, as I said, there's not much more to say about this apart from just like how dangerous Geelong look when they get set up. As I said, they've got some of the best link ups in the competition. But if you take the other side, it's technically 2 games back to back where they've had a last half fade out. You know, they lost the last quarter against St Kilda, and they lost the last half against West Coast. So, you know, if Brad Scott is proactive, he's done his duties as a coach, he'll be well aware of this. He'll be drilling some things into the player and working out how to make sure that this is not something that goes into finals, and give them a chance for a make the most of their double chance opportunity. They finished 3rd. We'll say you probably already know who they face later, but it will be away, and yeah, they're going to have to pull something out to try and go straight to the prelims.
Yeah, pretty much. One thing I want to point out really quickly for the podcast, something that's a friend of the show, Snap, pointed out for us the other day, is the scoreline between, you know, the Hawthorn North Melbourne game and the Geelong West Coast game.
Yeah.
So if you swap them around, Hawthorn beat Geelong by 2 points. You can see right here. And then West Coast actually beat North Melbourne by like 29 points. So, you know, it's not all doom and gloom if you look at it that way.
I mean, as I said, look, it would have been interesting because, you think West Coast and North might have been a higher scoring match as if they played with the form of this week, considering no team could defend, a lick worth of anything. But, as I said, for all we've said about, there being some positive side, I'd say West Coast and North are probably still the biggest disappointments in terms of just flat out, no context performances. Context of just week in, week out. Because as I said, I will take injuries into account for Richmond.
Hmm.
But yeah, as I said, that being said, although West Coast did get beaten by 90 a fair few times, as I said, they do have that one up on North Melbourne, and they had a few upset wins, so
Very
you
true.
still take that.
Like that, like the first derby of the season. No one was expecting them to
First
win that.
derby against Melbourne too, the first time around. Yep.
We
So
definitely know that West Coast have some good signs. It's definitely just structural issues, primarily.
yeah, and as I said, again, we'll be teasing towards next week. It's also that decision on some of not so much the older players. There are some that are just going to go on, like Yo Cripps, Liam Ryan, for example.
Yeah.
But yeah, some of those mid-range players to like, do we invest more time into you, or do we go back to the draft, try and find some new avenues? Because at this moment, the way we're playing just isn't sustainable football across the whole season.
Yep, completely agree. Speaking of structural issues, both teams in my next game have a lot of that. Considering neither of them made finals. In fact, one of them is bottom of the ladder. So Richmond v Gold Coast at the MCG. Surprising for some reason, this game was at the MCG. Because considering it's against Gold Coast. Again, I feel like the game against St Kilda should have been at the MCG, and this game should have been at Marvel. Just swap the dates around. But I mean, is what it is. We needed a draw or a win to not finish 18th. Alas, that did not happen. The Suns just proved too good in the last half. We managed to keep up with them for at least a good half, and there was some good signs. When our starting sub was Marlon Pickett, his final game, and when he was put into the game in the third quarter, he lit up. Like the entire team felt like he lifted. And it did kind of make it close in the third quarter, but the Suns just bolted away in the fourth. But yeah, the world sadly said goodbye to Dustin Martin, Dylan Grimes, Marlon Pickett, and Sam Naismith. Obviously, not all of them played; only Pickett played. But it's still a touching tribute at the end of the day. Unfortunately, this was also Neil Baum's final game as part of our coaching staff. However, he was not at the game. He was in hospital after surgery, as he's retiring from his career overall. Also, our final game for Brendan Gale as CEO, as he moves on to Tasmania, as I mentioned before. So it was a very, very hard game for Richmond supporters, as it really was the start of a new era. So the scoreline overall was 10-6-66 to 14-10-94. Again, Gold Coast making most of their midfield structure, just completely overpowering ours. Noah Anderson was very, very important to that. He was completely dominant in the midfield. Finished with 30 disposals at 80% efficiency, 8 contested possessions, 9 marks, 7 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 7 score involvements, 25 pressure strikes, a goal, and 601 meters gained. Matt Rowell, I don't have his statistics here specifically, but he was very, very important to their tackling pressure, as he always is. I believe he's also top in clearances as well, as he normally is.
9 tackles, top the night. Clearances, he was 8 clearances.
Yep.
29 possessions, 16 contested possession, 8 ground ball gets.
Cute.
Yeah.
He was doing
36 pressure acts.
He was doing normal Matt Rowell things. To be expected. Yeah. Ben Long started up forward, kicking 3-2 from 12 disposals, 5 marks, 6 score involvements, 6 tackles, and 14 pressure acts. And then co-captain Jared Witts won the ruck battle, which is usually very hard to do against Nankervis. He finished with 46 headouts with 17 to advantage, and 19 disposals, 9 contested possessions, 4 clearances, 10 score involvements, 12 pressure acts, 4 1%ers, and a goal himself. So, despite the Suns not making finals under their first year under Damien Hardwick, there's still some good signs. At least they know they can win on the MCG. Granted, it is against Richmond, who is 18th on the ladder. But also, this is literally their only game of the season that was on the MCG, which is kind of crazy to think about. Like, it's understandable because they are a smaller team, so you normally get games relegated to Marvel because that makes sense because you're actually going to fill that stadium for the most part. Or like you play down in Geelong, or you go to Ballarat against the Dogs or something like that. But like it's very rare to see them on the MCG. But for them to actually get this experience to just play on the MCG like once is good for them because finals are won in the MCG. Every team needs
Yeah.
that kind of experience.
Look, I'm holding back our parody rant at the moment. Like as I said, this is not that unusual, especially for the Suns, because unfortunately, normally you have to be in the top 8 to really get that MCG draw. If you are a team outside of Victoria, that as I said, bottom 10 team. So, look, as I said, it is a quirk of the comp. As much as I don't think the Suns deserve any primetime games anytime soon, I'll still put a year on. I wouldn't expect them to necessarily push into finals next year. Again, we'll talk about that. But in
I do
terms of
agree.
pure scheduling, as I said, they've got a bit to go. But that being said, there needs to be more ways for the AFL to just schedule some more. I know it doesn't fill the seats, but give a few more of these Richmond Sun games. Maybe not round 24.
And it doesn't have
Maybe
to
with
necessarily be against Richmond. It could be against Collingwood.
North,
Could be
St
against
Kilda.
if it's against North, St Kilda, the Bulldogs or Essendon, it's going to be at Marvel because they're co-tenants.
Yeah, I know, but like when you got that like contractual scheduling game, because some games are just flipped over. If you have that awareness, you can organize some of those games. It just doesn't happen because as I said, the AFL being the AFL, they would rather give something like a Carlton game an extra MCG over as I said, some of these struggling sides, which means that the away called minnow teams, like Gold Coast, like West Coast, like Fremantle, they just miss out. Port's had a fairly good run. I think Adelaide's been a bit unders, but South Australian.
South Australian football is very good in terms of being able to utilize the MCG for the most part.
Yeah, exactly, compared to some of the others. But
And
yeah,
so
I'll go.
New South Wales football for that fact, actually. Although
Yeah,
GWS do play more games at Marvel than they do the MCG, but that's besides the point. It's 50-50 for them at the moment, I think.
I'm just saying, it's just like, especially when you have the Gold Coast who are, as I said, you don't want to be too dire, but you do have to realize that eventually there has to be a point in a franchise where you decide how much you really want to back, or you have to decide on things like relocation, because as I said, it's not quite the point of the Suns yet. But it is very hard to keep them interested in football when they're in a rebuild and it's like 12 years into their history.
They debuted 2011, so
Yeah.
it's
So
almost 14 years.
yeah, exactly. So, as I said, they've really got to at least invest into giving them half a chance because this rebuild has got to be it. Like for me, and again, I don't want to be too dire on the Suns. I never want to see a club,
Absolutely
fold.
fail. Yeah.
But, as I said, it is getting to that point. But hopefully, as I said, with the players, you said, few good signs. Sam Flanders, fantastic game. Noah Anderson, fantastic game. Witt's great. And Raul, of course. Hopefully they can build on something. But, as you said, it's just, another year for the Suns.
Yep, pretty much. In terms of positive hopes for Richmond, Tim Taranto did what he has been signed to do. He was a complete tackling bull in the middle. 30 disposals, 9 contested possessions, 8 marks, 4 inside 50s, 4 score involvements, 14 tackles, 27 pressure acts. Jacob Hopper was very important too. I love it when those two are actually in sync. It's very good. 24 touches, 16 contested possessions, 4 inside 50s, 13 clearances, and 5 tackles. Daniel Rioli kicking 2 goals from 30 touches, 6 contested possessions, 5 marks, 6 inside 50s, 6 score involvements, 5 tackles, and 23 pressure acts. The one thing that I've always found interesting about Daniel, especially this season, is that I feel like he forgets that he is a premiership forward. Because sometimes I've seen him play during the season where he's running towards inside 50, ball in hand, pretty much direct shot on goal, and he doesn't go for it, even though he knows he has the range.
Exactly.
I don't know if it's it was just a confidence thing during that period, but it's You're a three-time premiership small forward. It doesn't matter that you're now in halfback. You know that you can kick these. Kick it, please.
And I get, look, it comes a point where, like, we know we've maybe criticized, what do you call it? Not Marley
Marlon
Pickett.
Pickett.
No.
Jay Bolton?
Bolton.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
for
yeah. No,
being a
yeah,
bit
I know all
selfish
about it.
in this rebuild. I would say Daniel Rioli, I may suffers a bit from the opposite. Like, you can see it in his eyes. He wants to give off to a young forward line to help them develop, but sometimes you just gotta win
He's always
games
had a
like
team
that.
first mentality. Always.
Yeah, sometimes winning games is like more important than necessarily getting every single disposals to every single player. Sometimes in a winning game, you're still gonna have players that are, struggling.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, so in terms of the sliding scale, as you say, sometimes you just gotta kick it.
And like,
But no, I mean, he's a
uh,
class player.
yeah, and like, I'm sure we're gonna talk about this next week, of course. But like, out of like the core like four players that are looking at going to other clubs, being him, Baker, Bolton, and Graham, we're gonna miss Rioli the most if he goes. He is that important to our halfback right now. It's and like,
Yeah, in
and
terms
granted,
of
he's
how
not
Richmond play.
the oldest player. Like he's still quite young. He's only like
Mm.
25 off the top of my head. Um,
Yeah.
but he already has the veterancy within the team that's super important to the younger players already.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, as I said, I've always rated him just how composed and how versatile his game is, being
Mm.
relatively young.
Yeah,
Um,
he
and yeah,
molded into Bashahuli's role very very easily, and
oh, for sure.
it's
Yeah.
amazing to see what he has been able to do since transitioning.
Yep, absolutely.
And then final shout out to Marlon Pickett, of course, subbed in into the third quarter. Sam Banks went out with a minor injury. It wasn't mentioned in the match report, so I don't think it was too bad in the end of the day. But he got his fairy tale final goal in the last quarter. The MCG absolutely erupted when it happened, because there was only like 1,000 Suns fans there.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it was very good to see him at least get some recognition for, it might have been a slightly tumultuous season outside of the club for him, but within the four walls and within our community of fans, we still loved him as we did all of our players, and
Mm.
it was a very very fitting send off for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very weird career for him. He debuted on a premiership and
He
he
debuted on a
finished
grand final.
on I meant that literally, but yeah, as I said, on the grand final, and he finished his career with a spoon. So he's won something at the very least on either end.
He's
But
experienced the
yeah,
entire cycle of an AFL team. And
yeah, and
we
as I
will
said,
go a little bit more in depth into that next week as well.
yeah, exactly. We'll talk a bit, but yeah, as I said, obviously with some of the off-field stuff, yeah, you just hope that, as I said, um, yeah, he just can go on, focus on himself, get himself right, and yeah, as I said, in terms of playing for Richmond, though, he definitely will be a short career but a memorable one.
Absolutely. All right, you have the next game that we're going to discuss.
Yes, and continue the trend. It's going to be another brief one. Despite patches of good goal kicking by the Dons keeping him in the game, Brisbane would ruthlessly dominate the Dons. Pretty deep, dire defense. They capitalized massively on turnovers. 80% of their total score, 73 points. Coming off them, it was the show of the smalls with Kyle Lohman and Charlie Cameron getting 2 and 3 goals in the first half, presenting well as the Lions would dominate forward half chains, but that dominance would be slightly mitigated by a 4-9 third quarter, one that could have easily made this game a absolute blowout of epic proportions, as they would just coast at home in the last quarter and just record a modest 20-point win, 11-21, 87 to 10-7, 67. Look, honestly, it's a bit hard to say that they really needed to put in the dagger once their win percentage was not important whatsoever.
Pretty much.
Australia would not be able to catch up to them. Essendon did do Good work, some good work in the centre with 3 centre bounce goals, but it was work around the ground stoppage that absolutely killed them, as the Big O influenced a lot of the clearance work, and that meant as soon as Brisbane laid a tackle or the ball was loose, they would absolutely tear the Dons to shreds. And, we mentioned clearance a lot. So would it be a shock to you to say that none other than Nocky Neal had an absolute light out? 40 possession, 19 contested possessions, 83% efficiency. Absolutely great with those amount of contested.
Mm-hmm.
7 clearances, 15 ground ball gets, 8 intercepts. So pushing well up the ground, 11 score involvements, 1 goal, 1. He was absolutely terrific. Young defender, Will Ashcroft, second-year player, getting back into the game after his ACL last year. Sorry, not defender. I'm confusing Ashcroft with, what's his name? The other good one. Too many.
Darcy Wilson, maybe?
Yeah, Darcy Wilmot, but yeah,
Wilmot,
no, you
thank you.
got it.
There's a Darcy
Yeah, so
Wilson
he was
somewhere. I can't remember which team. I think it's the Dogs.
Yeah, St Kilda.
Oh,
That's
there you
the youngster. Anyway, Ashcroft, 30 possessions, 7 score involvements, and took 15 marks as he builds into this. He's been, I'll say about 7 games back from his injury for the Lions. So
yeah, something like that.
he might, he will take an important part in their finals campaign. So it's good to see the young player back. Warmed up, I should say, because he was electric last year, if anyone's forgotten. And Zorks set the rebounding tone off halfback with 28 disposals, 605 metres gained at 86% efficiency. He had 6 intercepts, 6 score involvements, half of which coming from his first possession. Talking about those launches, 10 marks, and just a composed veterans game. McGrath was good all night for Geelong, 34 possessions. And Zerrett just did Zerrett things. I don't really need to go into his stats. It was just a Zerrett night. But the last game I want to highlight, he has an absolute cracker. It is the man going out into the sunset. He gets his farewell game. Admittedly, Estate out. Estate out? 2 states out.
2 states out. It should have been
from
down
where
here
he would like to
last
be.
week, but
Not to be, but 34 disposals, 9 ground ball gets, and a night high 12 interceptions and 4 score involvements. You could not fault his effort and want to play. Essendon had a very lovely tribute with a dice logo, which I think references clothing brand, where proceed of those donations go towards sick children, is it?
I don't know, but I'll see if I can find it.
But yeah, as I said, so it was a very nice touch at the end of the day. Despite the kerfuffle last week, they did give him a nod. And again, just wrapping up in terms of other players to note, Zach Bailey, Darcy Wilmot, as we mentioned before, and Kyle Langford all had fairly decent games. Sorry. And yeah, it's hard to say if Brisbane will like this result going into the finals. Inefficiency, obviously being a bane of the last few weeks and reared its ugly mane again. They did dictate the style of play, which is exactly how they want to play. And I don't think the low pressure nature of the game will bother them that much, because again, they just needed to get this 5th place with a win and secure the home ground at the Gabba to take on a very vulnerable 8th. They will not be the most informed team in the final, but at the same time, they should not be taken lightly with the amount of clearance dominance they showed tonight. As for the Dons, they bow out of the season with a respectable record, but they'll be wondering if they as hard as the edge they showed at the start of the year, as swings in dominance when they win versus lose the clearance, probably a bit bigger gulf than they would like. We've talked about other issues. We'll talk about it again next week with the Dons. But I will say, from this game, defense is a clear priority. Mackay, serviceable all year. I'm not saying he had a bad year, but around him, they probably spent the year playing their 3rd best options in terms of tall defenders, whether that be Laverde, whether that being Oh, not Mason Redmond. Who's the other one? Played a bit iffy at times.
Nick Hind?
No, Hindy's retired. I'll get it. Uh, Plus he plays St Kilda. Oh no, he played Essendon. Um,
Uh,
uh, Laverde and
um,
I'm just thinking of Redmond.
Gresham?
Um, oh, Kelly when he went
Oh,
back.
yeah,
That's what I'm
that's
talking
right.
about. Because they did play him back at times, and he did play pretty woefully, I will admit. Much better up the ground. So yeah, my point is, in 2025, I look to shape up this defense, give him a bit more identity. So when they get smashed in the clearances like they did, they won't get smashed as much. Might end up with a couple more wins in the season, and that might be good enough for finals next year. But, as I said, it's a very tentative Don side. A lot to be seen what they'll do next year. But realistically, they probably finished about where a good percentage of people saw them at,
Yeah, I
just
think most people
pushing for
expected this
finals.
kind of.
Yeah, it's just the difference is instead of pushing for finals, they fell out of it. It's, but either or.
Right.
Yeah,
It's kind of just an is what it is with Essendon. It's a weird curse that they have. It's that every year they say
yeah,
they're gonna make finals, and like for half the season they're actually in the chance, and then they kind of just slip away in a second half burnout. It's like it's either a
yeah,
weird
like,
curse or it's just like their legs give like they just run out of legs like in the second half of the season.
I don't think it's that. I've never really seen an Essendon game where, like, I've never seen an Essendon game this year, and this is a lot different to other games last year. So where, like, the main flaws of the game wasn't what we already know,
Mm,
which is at least a good sign.
it
And again,
is.
we'll talk about it next week. But as I said, we're talking about the defense. We're talking about the failure in forward line conversion. The midfield, for the most part, as I said, for varying in characters and age, were at least reliable in their efforts. Again, the only setback to this was that the one game against Port and the one game against St Kilda. But apart from that, as I said, the Dons, you at least mostly saw what you got.
Mm.
But unfortunately, that was also reflected by the not so convincing wins that they had this year. A lot of close wins, a lot of games where they didn't look the prettiest, but still managed to get the job done. But again, wasn't quite enough this year. Finished, 11th? So,
Yes, that is
yeah.
correct because Freo finished 10th and Collingwood finished ninth.
Yep.
So it's yeah, as we said, it's about where we're expecting them to be. Still a lot to work on. Whereas for Brisbane, playing finals, home final, granted it's an elimination final, but it's also against the Carlton squad who is going through a lot at the moment. So we'll talk about
Yeah.
that a bit later on. But yeah, I
Yeah, the
don't.
mystery box of the finals.
Yeah, pretty much.
Carlton. Carlton.
Is there anything more you want to touch on for that game?
No, I think we're done for that. As I said, it could have been a bigger blowout, but yeah, as I said, Essendon really didn't show much that game. So
They just tried their hardest for Hep. They can't do much more than that.
yeah, as I said, some of the conversion was nice. Players were giving an effort, but at the same time, as I said, Brisbane probably could have converted a bit more and made it a bit of a bigger margin.
Yeah, it's fair enough. All right, let's head down from Brisbane to Sydney for Sydney v Adelaide at the SCG. Pretty much a dead rubber game. Whatever happened in this game was not going to affect pretty much anything. I don't think Adelaide was even going to be able to move up anywhere in the ladder. So, like, obviously, they definitely weren't making top 8. Everyone already knew that. But I don't think
Mhm.
like their standing itself would have really moved too much. Maybe one position up.
No, they were in a gulf between Melbourne and West Coast,
Well, there
locked
you
in the
go.
bottom four.
So it was quite literally a dead rubber game. Nothing, win or
Yeah,
lose, it didn't
forever.
matter what happened. But the Crows, despite what they were up against, and also a shock axing to Josh Shelley for apparently some
Mm.
off-field comments he had said. It's, uh,
Teethgate.
it's a bit sudden for people not entirely in the know. Um, but Crows gave it their all. They really put the fight up to Sydney for the most part. But Sydney just stood tall. Their machine just kept on churning. And the game ended up finishing with 18-13, 121 to 13-12, 90. So 31 point deficit, but you know, fairly fairly generous considering 25 scoring shots for Adelaide.
Yeah.
Um
No, it was definitely, yeah, as I said, it wasn't quite, I wouldn't quite put it as like respectable game. Like, as I said, Sydney got out to a pretty big and Adelaide got a few more in young time.
mm,
But, yeah, no, as I said, what I will say is there were a lot of players that were definitely trying, at least
oh,
from what I could see in the
absolutely.
highlights.
Like Adelaide was playing for pride. They weren't really
Yeah,
like playing for obviously they weren't playing for a loss. They were again
yeah.
like complete dead rubber. So they were just playing for pride at this point. And to be fair, there were some pretty promising signs. Like again,
Yeah, well,
like
offensively,
yeah, as we
um,
talk about, Phil Thorpe being a massive standout. Like I don't have his stats written down here for this game, but I know he's definitely going to be a major important part going into next season for them, especially considering we don't know what's going on with Tex.
yeah, I mean, as I said, we'll see an announcement or we don't.
Yeah,
But yeah,
a
he kicked
fair
three goal
chance it'll
threes,
all come
eight,
out during this week and stuff.
yeah, 8 marks, three clearances because he did a few hitouts in the ruck.
He did.
Um, Overall, pretty solid.
But going on to Sydney, being that they did win the game, let's talk about the lizard in Nick Blakey. He was pretty dominant off halfback, finishing with 32 touches at 81.3% efficiency, 7 intercepts, 14 marks, 4 inside 50, 7 score involvements, 8 pressure acts, 3 1%ers, 2 goals, and 673 metres gained, which was one of the highest of the entire round. Errol Golden was lively as always, collecting 24 disposals, 10 contested possessions, 8 clearances, 8 score involvements, 25 brush strikes, and 2 goals himself. And James Rowbottom was an absolute machine, as he normally is. 21 disposals at 90.5% efficiency, 10 contested possessions, 4 clearances, a goal, 7 score involvements, 9 tackles, and 25 pressure acts. So again, Sydney Machine was just churning, keeping their form going into September. The one issue that they did have is that they ended up managing Isaac Heaney. Maybe he pulled up a little bit sore and they didn't want to risk it, which is fair enough. So they subbed in Robbie Fox. Um, and as far as I'm aware, like their entire machine was pretty efficient overall.
Yeah, and it's going to be fairly ironic because, we saw all those stats about how Sydney are like going to be the team that finished the minor premiership with, 5 losses out of the last 8 matches and, whatever. But they're also going into the finals with 3 win streak.
Yeah,
So
it's like
you take off that what you will. Um, yeah, they're going to be a hard team to judge, but they deserve from the season to get their top spot. As said,
absolutely.
um,
I don't think anyone,
sometimes a loss.
even when they hit that kind of loss streak, I don't think anyone really felt like really subscribed to the fact that they could fall out of first position. They were kind of very solidly there the whole time.
Yeah, look, as I said, so brilliant prediction by yours truly. I told you they weren't going to get lower than 6 games. Sorry, 6 losses, which is what they ended up on. Granted, I did make that when they only had the claim when they only had 2 losses, I think. So
I think that was just after their loss to Freo.
got out of dodge with that one. Yeah. But anyways, yeah, as I said, yeah, there's more of the Sydney we saw before. Obviously, I didn't watch this game. I watched the other one. But just looking at the stat line, yeah, on surface level, is pretty much a very early Sydney game.
Yeah.
As for Adelaide, as I said, look,
No Rankin.
I will say,
Like they still perform pretty well without Rankin, which is surprising considering he's normally the one that is the big player that matters.
yeah, and as I said, I still think they've got some work in terms of the inside midfield, how they will format and present that for next year. Look, I still found it amazing how they treated Rochelle going into this round. I won't talk too much about it. There's been so many talking points on it. But last game of the round, heading into an off season, I'm just amazed. Like, one thing you wouldn't want to do to a young player, or just any player, like, you're telling the outside world, you know, if you step out of line, which arguably he did, arguably he didn't. Like, yeah, I would. If it came out that there was like some internal punishment for him making those comments, that's fine. But to put him on blast,
Yeah.
in the media 3 times, I don't like it. Um, the list management would hate it coming into an off season. But list wise, player wise, they have the structure to work with. Hopefully, they can figure out who they might want to target in the off season. But as I said, it's we won't call this a rebuild. I think their win loss record and position are a bit worse, better than it seems. But as I said, this is sort of just where they're at the moment. They're just working out their internal mechanisms, and they came up against, as you say, a better oiled machine today.
Yeah, pretty much. Like we've talked about over the past 2 weeks, that Adelaide do have some really solid pieces. They have a really good core, and like their backline is easily their best part, like by far. But yeah, it's just about internal issues, figuring out their structural management, especially in that midfield. Because when one player goes out, normally it's very much worse for wear. Like especially Rankin is a very good point of that.
Yeah,
as we've seen. This week though, like their midfield actually wasn't too bad without Rankin. I think they actually already figured out how to play without him. At least as that course set up, it's just about trying to be more efficient in their workload. Especially when someone like Riley O'Brien, who's like actually did fairly well in the ruck, he won the ruck battle overall. When you're getting someone like him, giving you advantages, like making sure you have the right players who take that advantage, because it's normally it is Rankin or Crouch who take those advantages, but sometimes it's not always going to happen.
So, no, it's like, yeah. And yeah, as I said, it also goes the other way because, I said, like I said, this game, they've actually got some healthy scoring numbers. 3 goals, 2 from centre bounce. I think Riley probably started a few of those, as you were saying, with his ruck possession. In terms of even just stoppages, 5-7's just, okay. 37 points is just okay, but at least it was from 5-7.
Yeah.
So that's 12 scoring shots from stoppage. That's not too bad. As I said, it's just a few of the turnovers, a bit of the leak. Yeah, consistency. Very young team. It's no surprise Sydney 12-7 with turnovers. But again, there's no real need to harp on it at this point because, as I said, Adelaide, pretty young team trying to figure out the exact blueprint of their side. After, they found themselves last year a bit ahead of themselves. They found themselves this year a bit behind themselves. We'll see what they come up with next year.
Yep, agreed. But yeah, as I did mention, Riley O'Brien did win the ruck battle. I finished with 38 hitouts, 12 to advantage, 11 touches overall, 6 contested possessions, 3 marks, 3 clearances, 10 score involvements, and 11 pressure acts. And then Sam Berry, I thought was kind of the standout in the middle overall. 22 disposals at 81.8% efficiency, 7 contested possessions, 6 inside 50, 6 clearances, 7 score involvements, 20 pressure acts, and a goal to himself. And then, as I mentioned before, only a late change with Isaac Heaney being managed and replaced by Robbie Fox. No injuries otherwise from this game, which is very good for Sydney, because I think all the other players that might have been at risk, they rested anyway. And then for Adelaide, also good for them, because you don't want an injury going into the off-season. It's never usually a good sign. But, I think that pretty much sums that one up.
Yeah, absolutely. So we will go to the Mega Sunday.
Yeah.
And
juicy games.
Geez, 3 games, all significant to the all that linked up to each other. Significance for the matches ahead. And this is probably the least interesting of the games. But the one thing it did give us, it took us around 24, game 6 to get it. But we've got ourselves a wind bowl in the breezy, cold Ballarat. What is it's Ballarat countryside? I guess it is.
Yes,
I don't know.
it would be considered countryside for this.
Yeah. So yeah, they were teasing us with 70-meter kicks and a possible shootout. And you know what? Maybe the cold weather meant that a few GWS players didn't want to get out of bed because Bedford, Stone, and Daniels were all laid out for different reasons. Sort of a management thing. Again, a tiny bit weird that they were all laid out. You want to make those management things. You don't want to be running your exact 3 emergencies when you go into a game. But that happened. So in the first quarter, it was very much going through the motions, trying to figure out, a very feeling out sort of thing, especially in these sort of conditions.
Mm-hmm.
The Dogs were doing very solidly against the breeze, but were only able to kick 3 goals to 1, mainly again because the wind was just so hard to deal with. There was a lot of turnovers, but again, decent pressure. Both teams trying the hardest to, try and find a way, an avenue to score. And yeah, as I said, when the Dogs got the win in the second, though, they would turn the blowtorches on. They scored 6 goals to 2. But I will say, with how swirly the wind was, because it was blowing a howling gale across the goal face, there was some excellent set shot kicking. I think both teams were I think it was 7-2 to 5-2 in terms of set shots. So I want to shout it out. I know set shot accuracy and the Western Bulldogs don't exactly go hand in hand. But weirdly enough, I don't know, maybe the set shots actually ended up going in because of the breeze. Who knows? But yeah, as I said, Bulldogs took absolute advantage into it, as both teams would defend okay. I thought, as I said, both teams would also get some involvements with their key forwards as well. But the difference, I thought, was the Doggies' transition was much better all night.
Mm-hmm.
GWS had trouble making multiple chain possessions, and the Dogs around the ground, field pressure was terrific. It's not exactly the highlight of their game. As we talked about, their forward half pressure almost always mammoths their back half pressure, but this game, it was just fantastic, which is good for them. Because again, in a final series, you get games like this where, you might not have a Harlan Gale, but you might have a lot of transition game feeling out. So all in all, a last quarter bits would spell the end for the Giants' hopes for second on the ladder, as the Dogs would just bully territory in the last quarter, showed the brand of football they want to take into going into finals, as they would win 14-14, 98 to 9-7, 61. And considering the conditions, I would actually say that this win was much more impressive than meets the eye for the Bulldogs. Honestly, it was very class in trying conditions. And as I said, as I said, it's a very weird, 14-14. It's just you look at it and go, at the end of the season. But again, when you look at some of the shots and the amount that the ball was moving, absolutely fantastic. In terms of impact when it mattered and overall class, I think Ed Richards made a solid claim for best on ground. He had 29 disposals, 12 contested possessions, 11 ground ball gets, 8 inside 50s, 31 pressure at 8 score involvements, 2 goals, 1. And more class, as I mentioned, Bulldogs were very classy with some of their players. Bailey Dale, absolutely great disposals, 27, 89% efficiency. Again, this was a blustery day. So 569 meters gained as well. 6 intercepts and a goal. And yeah, as I said, this was a very high intercept game. Produced a bit of an anomaly. 5 players would have half or more of their possessions be interception possessions. So that was Taylor, Idan, Buckley for GWS, and Freya and Lob for Bulldogs, with Ardon and Taylor both getting 11 each, and they help quell a decent inside 50 dominance by the Dogs. So, as I said, while the Dogs did have dominance, I will give credit to that GWS backline. They are looking very impressive in this backline of the season. But talking about the other spectrum, Hogan took his goal tally to a very nice 69 goals. That's what the yeah, it is the Coleman.
It is the Coleman, correct. You're correct.
Yes. Yeah, so that's what the Coleman finishes on. He took 4 marks inside 50, had 7 score involvements and 2 goals too. And finally, it was a quiet game by the Bonds, but he may get a cheeky Brownlow vote. Yeah, 22 disposals at a mid 59% efficiency, but he had 11 clearances, 7 tackles, 21 pressure acts, 9 score involvements, and a goal. I think this was just the Bond trying his hardest to go a bit dirty, win those hard balls. Because as I said, a lot of ground balls to win, a lot of mid-range, sorry, not mid-range, I guess contested possession in the fact where, yeah, a ball just needed to be won. But GWS, on the other hand, you know, I'll mention a few of their good players as well. But I think one issue that I want to, you know, highlight, their 2 biggest possession getters, Tom Green and Lockie Whitfield, with 37 and 42 possessions apiece. I want to format this stat with I still think they had an all-round respectable game. And I'm not, you know, being too harsh on them. I think it's a bit of a systematic issue. But from their 79 possessions, only 3 were involved in scoring chains for the Giants. That's 4%, which...
It's pretty disappointing.
It is, you know, it's just what I've said about the Giants. Like, they've had these good wins, but they don't feel like they're converting consistently. And a lot of their best conversion is more from halfback than it is from the center.
Yep.
So again, I'm not picking on those 2 players. Like, I know I've said, like, Lockie Whitfield, I think is a bit of a chippy player. But you know what I mean? It's like, you still got to work hard to get 42 possessions.
Yeah, so, absolutely. Like, it's not that he had a bad game. It's just the players that he was passing the ball to weren't as efficient with it as he was.
I mean, kind of, because he still had a lot of turnovers, mind you. But you know what I mean? It's just like the chain. It's part of that Giants movement where, as I said, sometimes I have these beautiful coast to coast, not in the literal sense, back after forward line chains. Just beautifully get a goal, have a beautiful run on. But then they'll spend like 10 minutes chipping the ball in the background. They don't have enough kicking efficiency to keep them. You can rack up a lot of intercepts against them. And this is the one point, even though they're the 3rd ranked team on the ladder, if I was a finals team, I would be focusing so much on that. And there's a few teams that I think could take advantage of that fact. But that's in the future. There's a lot of time to clean up some things, and there are a lot of positives for the Giants. I will say, as I said, I thought their backline was actually the biggest part of that. I said there was more players, but that was pretty much it. I want to say, like, Buckley, Idan, Taylor, absolutely fantastic as a core. Yeah, so I said that was like the main ones for that. Josh Kelly also, I thought, had a pretty fantastic game as well. And yeah, so the Doggies, they'll be absolutely thrilled with their win. A Ballarat game was no doubt like a good test, I'll say, for them. Like, it was a hard ground to adjust to. They were up against a top 4 team. They were able to stay true to their game plan while still making the necessary adjustments to cope with these changing conditions. Obviously, they're not going to get that breeze in the finals, but if there's something unexpected that doesn't go that way, I think this game will be a good lessons from them. And as I said, GWS, there was 7-4 from set shots. So they were scoring absolutely phenomenally, you know, considering the breeze. And yeah, as I said, it made the game seem closer than it was. As I said, I thought in general play, the Giants were sort of just beaten all night. But yeah, as I said, one of the biggest things as well, a few teams are like this. The other thing was up forward, the Bulldogs were able to generate a lot more set plays. They got 10 more shots from general play, as the Giants were absolutely constricted in that. So, as I said, and, what I mentioned before, I won't call him exact whiff on this game, but Canelio, Haynes comes in, and Captain Green, they sort of struggled all night to get involved in the game. Toby got two of his angriest goals. Sometimes when he's playing bad, he just gets very angry and then just scores out of nowhere. But in terms of whole game influence, he was pretty much shut down. And finally, I did feel like I was going to mention more GWS players. Kieran Briggs, he was battling with an injury all night, and his battle with English with a clearly sore shoulder, and still managed to quite reasonably beat him, I think was a big up in this pretty much comprehensive loss. And yeah, there's not really much more to say. As I said, this Giants side, it's weird. They were the informed team. They had 9 or so wins in this back half. Maybe it wasn't 9. Maybe I'm exaggerating there. But,
I think it was close.
It was a lot.
It was a lot.
Yeah. And yet, I don't know. I'm still a bit tentative. We'll talk about it a bit more. But they've definitely got some exposable flaws.
Oh,
but
yeah, absolutely.
As much as these flaws are developing in their side, their backline is getting back to pretty reasonable. They still gave up 14-4, but this was from 69 inside 50s.
Nice.
To I think it was 45. Maybe it wasn't 69. I maybe got that head because of Hogan. But it was around 15 to 20 inside 50s. As I said, the Giants just didn't do their forward line a favor because they couldn't get it in there enough. And when it did go in there, it had to get that set mark shots. As I said, when you see the shot chart from GWS, honestly, watch the highlights of this game. Just look at the flight path of the ball because,
there's one specific goal that I can picture that I want to specifically mention. It's kicked from the left pocket with the wind. I don't remember which play
it went a goalpost.
Kicks far right and just flows directly straight into the goals because it was carried by the wind. It was beautiful to see.
Exactly. Honestly, I know it's weird because, as a fan, you don't really want to see such an important game go to such a janky, such a janky style. Because, you don't really want your finals hopes or, setup hinging on whether you can take a breeze that you're not used to, But as I said, I think, in terms of general play, there was still a lot left to be desired for the Giants. I think the Bulldogs deserve this. Obviously, they're going to be a bit more used to the Ballarat conditions, but there is nothing to take away from their absolute beastly contested possession dominance over GWS in this game.
Yeah, pretty much. It's certainly one for the ages. Even though it was not a finals game in any sense of the word, it definitely felt like a finals game in terms of how important it was.
Yeah, and exactly. And, I feel like I've taken a bit too away from GWS because they were trying very hard to keep up with the Bulldogs. As I said, they really did not have many options inside 50, opportunities, I should say, inside 50s. As I said, I was actually right. It was 69 inside 50s to 45. So there you go. But yeah, as I said, if you're in the GWS forward line and you have so much talent around you, you just want to be in a position where, you want to be careful of not just blazing it in, especially to this Bulldogs backline, which still did fairly well. Both Lob and Liam Jones had fairly respectable games. As I said, the GWS forward line will want to be fed a bit more coming into finals. And, up against Sydney, still, in terms of scoring, one of the best defenses in the league. Makes for a very interesting matchup. And as we mentioned before, the Western Bulldogs Hawthorn matchup might just be one of the most defining finals games of the season.
Absolutely. Speaking of high pressure games, shall we move on to the next one?
I think we shall.
All right, so we're going over only an hour down the road from Ballarat to Marvel Stadium, where Carlton and St Kilda had an insanely important high stakes shootout under the roof. So thankfully they weren't affected by the crazy winds and the storm that was coming in. But this match was massively crucial to Carlton's finals hopes. They needed to win, and they were guaranteed finals. They lost, and it was up to Fremantle. So it was up to Fremantle and Port Adelaide, and the outcome of that as to whether they will play finals. Obviously, now we know the outcome. Carlton are in, and they play the Brisbane Lions. But as of Sunday, no one knew what was going to happen. This was a crazy game to watch against St Kilda, and St Kilda turned up. Their past couple of weeks has been very, very impressive, and it's very promising going into the off season and what their plans are going to be for the 2025 season, obviously. But yeah, no one saw the absolute scenes that was going to come out of this game. So the final scoreline was 11-8-74 to 11-10-76, with two important misses in the final quarter from Brodie Kemp and Mateus Filippo to make the stakes even higher in that last quarter. And then, sometimes it's just a small man that comes out of nowhere, kicks a goal out of nothing, and absolutely flips like the final 30 seconds on its head. And that was Jack Higgins. Kicked the match winner for St Kilda, put them 2 points in front, and completely sealed the game. Carlton, to their credit, without their two key forward players in Mackay and Kerno, they gave it their all. Patrick Cripps, of course, as I will mention, had another standout captain's game, as he did last week against West Coast. It was if you're gonna watch any part of this game, watch that last quarter, because it was absolutely insane, and I'm surprised that players made it out of that arena alive, to be honest. But let's talk about some positives out of St Kilda. So Mateus Filippo, I thought he was extremely important. He finished with 20 touches with 7 contested possessions, 7 marks, 5 inside 50s, 5 score involvements, 9 tackles, 30 pressure acts, and a 1-2 scoreline. Again, he's a young player. I believe he's only 22, 23, but he's been very important over the past few weeks in terms of St Kilda's structure, and been very impressive as well. He's been getting a lot of support from Sinclair, from Steele, and when he's gone up forward, Membry has helped him out a lot as well. I'm sure that will be more beneficial once King comes back from his ACL, PCL. He did a massive injury earlier in the season. Can't remember what it was.
I think it was PCL.
All I know was leg related. So once he comes back, hopefully he's 100% fit. He will be very, very beneficial to how that forward line structure works. Because again, he's their primary tool. So Membry has to step into that role when he's not there. Jack Steele, massive pressure game. He wasn't originally on Patrick Cripps, but it was moved on to Patrick Cripps in the second half, playing the tagging role. And it was pretty much to great effect. He kept Cripps very, very quiet in the last quarter. I believe Cripps only had like 4 touches in the last quarter, which was actually huge. But Steele himself finished with 20 touches, 9 contested possessions, 5 marks, 6 inside 50s, 5 clearances, 6 tackles, 29 pressure acts, 2 1%ers, and 416 meters gained. And then Cal Wilkie was an absolute wall in defense, finishing with 11 disposals, 9 contested possessions, 8 intercept possessions, 7 1%ers, and 100% time on ground. So, in terms of ladder position, it's definitely a very disappointing season for St Kilda, considering they did make finals last season. But in terms of these past couple of weeks, there's definitely some extremely positive signs going into their off season, and the 2025 season.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, as I said, here's like, I've been a bit harsh on saying so. I felt like they've been a bottom 4 team, but yeah, I said I think proof's in the pudding over this last thing. Like they're good. Finished. And they finished above Melbourne for a start. I think it's like 10th or 11th, but
I think they
you
finished
know,
12th or 13th.
is it? Oh yeah.
Yeah, because
Oh,
Collingwood.
and yeah. Okay,
Sorry,
maybe ahead.
Collingwood 9th,
Yeah, yeah,
Fremantle
yeah.
10th, Essendon 11th. I think.
Well, I meant taking over the Suns, taking over Melbourne. Like, there's a gap, more gap than I thought there was going to be, considering maybe like round 10, round 12 into the season, where they just look to not ever generate any score whatsoever. So there is credit. Like as I said, they still don't have a forward line per se, but they can at least figure out how to generate goals, which makes it much less. Oh, St Kilda in the first half of the season, you would not watch a replay. Whereas, they've had a few replayable games in the back half as well. So
They have.
But I will say it was a close loss. But I will still give credit. The Carlton Blues were very brave in this performance. 11 of their best 22 missing in this game. Pretty much only really their midfield was, we'll call it unaffected. Hadam Chera, obviously being the big one in that. Tom de Koning as well.
Yeah, but the Koning's still been missing for quite a few weeks, but so that's fair enough.
Oh no, like I'm saying, like in general.
Oh
like,
yeah.
So, look, every line was affected. It was pretty bad. But when you got Ollie Hollands playing as a little hard out, when you got Sard coming in, purely from injury, providing a bit of class. When you got Blake Acres, pushing forward, covering for the lack of forward targets. And you got players filling in the gaps. Jackson Binns, Ashton Moore came on, had a bit of an influence. As I said, Matt always even I saw in the first half he had a few options. He didn't look to have a good stat night, but when I was looking, he actually seemed fairly lively. I'll give him credit. Like this is the absolute limit of depth that they're pushing. As I said, I'll say it's comparable to Richmond. What Richmond's had to go through this year. Obviously not.
Honestly,
as long,
I do agree.
But for these last few rounds, it's undeniable. As I said, there'll be 1 and 2 in terms of adversity in list management. In injuries in list.
Yeah, absolutely. And like to Carlton's credit, the fact that they are able to still stand up and still play a really strong high pressure game, and with fairly accurate shooting, like it's very, very impressive. Like especially when you don't have the forward line that you normally do.
Yeah, exactly. And as I said, you can have a bit of a laugh. Like Carlton probably missing a few opportunities. I did hear that their forward line entries were a bit lacking. They had definitely a few more opportunities laid off. But again, you're relying on these clutch moments for a bunch of kids. And obviously a few of the veterans playing an absolutely fantastic game. But
absolutely.
Yeah. But on the flip side, as I said, instead of like one about Carlton, St Kilda could only play who they had in front of them, put absolute pressure on, and they made sure that they can take something really good out of this little contest. I say little, huge implications.
Huge implications for Carlton, not as much as St Kilda, but
yeah, exactly. Look, I don't know. I guess I'll bring it up now because obviously I was at the Fremantle Port game. I was there about 30 minutes before the bounce, I would say.
I think you mentioned that you were pretty much there like roughly around the time the fourth quarter started for this game.
Yeah. So as I said, when we were getting in was the fourth quarter. I remember that. And I was like, my dad had the radio on. He's a Fremantle supporter. So he's like giving me the rundown of what was happening. I was just watching it, not on KO. I was just watching the little score worm go up and down.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, as I said, you're talking about the last few moments when there was a little murmur when, I forget who it was. Who missed that final shot? Was it
For
like
Carlton or for St Kilda?
Carlton?
Brody Kemp.
Kemp missed that last shot from, what was it, 30 meters
Yeah,
out
it was about
in
30,
front of
40 minutes
goal.
out.
Everyone thought that was going to seal him. You can hear a few murmurs in the crowd. And then in that last minute, it was absolute scenes at Optus Oval. You could hear it. A small cheer when the ball was in the forward line.
Mm-hmm.
And then not a massive roar, a small roar when Jack Higgins kicked the goal. Because the radio, obviously, there was a few less radio people, and you're like, oh, something's happened. And then there was just this momentous
Massive
roar when both. Well, it was a roar that got bigger because the people that were watching on the screens in the bars around the ground saw it pretty much just after the radio. And then it got bigger when all the people watching on KO or any other service on their phone joined in. And it was massive. Great scenes at the Optus Oval.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, as I said, I'll probably remember that for quite a while. Like, this game, you know, was a game heard in the state of WA, that is for sure.
Absolutely. All right, and then just to round out this game, I'm going to talk about Carlton players. Obviously, we mentioned before how their veterans massively stood up. Jacob Wiedering is always one of them. He was immensely important for Carlton's defense, finishing with 15 disposals, 7 intercepts, 6 marks, 9 1%ers, plenty of one-on-one victories on his own outside of his 1%ers, and 100% time on ground. And then Patrick Cripps, of course, massive captain's game as he normally does, collected 30 touches. Honestly, because of the fact that the Bond had a somewhat quiet game, this might have sealed the Brownlow medal for Cripps. I'm going to be honest. It's either that or like Lockie Neal's going to be a sneaky chance yet again.
Dacos?
I don't know.
Look, I know.
I know Dacos is
Honestly,
definitely a sneaky chance as well, but I still don't entirely rate him in terms of the Brownlow. Top 5? Sure.
Don't rate him
but I
in
don't put him on
best player
top.
of the
I don't
year.
put him top 2.
I don't rate him as best player of the year, but I definitely rate him in possibility to win a Brownlow.
Oh,
I guess
no.
we'll talk about it in a bit, though.
Yeah. But yeah, Patrick Cripps, of course. 30 touches, 18 contested possessions, 4 marks, 8 clearances, 5 score involvement, 9 tackles, 20 pressure acts. Immensely important, as he always is. When he lifts, the team lifts. You cannot fault him at all for the effort that he puts out. I just hope that he doesn't pull up too sore, so he's actually able to try and do this yet again in finals. Because I don't know if they're going to make it out of Brisbane, I'll be honest. But
the broader
we will talk about
shoulders
that.
of Patrick Cripps.
And
I
then
know. Yeah,
one bit that did caught my eye. The late change, Mitch McGovern was pulled out. I don't know if it was due to injury or if it was just managed. But Orazio Fantasia came into the team, had a decent game overall. But yeah, this was insane to watch. And granted, you know, we're now going into finals, and rounds 0 to 24 don't really matter too much anymore. But if you want to watch a game coming out of this final round, watch this one. It was that good. This is, if as an impartial viewer, this is the sort of game that you want to watch because it's incredible.
Yeah, definitely both teams leaving nothing left on that table.
And then we have one more game to go, and that is to go over, as we mentioned before, to Optus Stadium, where Fremantle hosted Port Adelaide. You were there, and you got to see the absolute scenes.
Yeah, as I mentioned before, there was no doubt Freo knew what they were playing for because they would have heard that roar of the crowd. No chance to keep it quiet. It was at worst an open secret. And I think it showed because they absolutely came out of the blocks to start their game. Their first half pressure and dominance were held back by 2 things. One being their dreadful shot conversion from general play, and the other being a dreadfully over-umpired game, favouring Port. I haven't really talked about it to any like neutral viewers, but I assume you watched this.
I did watch
Oh,
most of it. I ended up going out start of the fourth quarter. So I didn't
yeah,
miss like half of the fourth quarter, but I did watch most of it, and it
yeah,
was yeah, that first half was insane to watch.
yeah. But yeah, I was just gonna ask, like the umpiring, like there was some questionable
There's
decisions.
always questionable decisions.
Look, I'm gonna say, like as I said, I think actually Freo got the worst of it. Which is weird because Port ended up losing the umpire free kick count. But yeah, there was a lot of weird things. It was very inconsistent. For as much over umpiring there was, they actually missed like a lot of stuff, like throws and whatnot. But look, yeah, that was just. This is just a prelude of something slightly going against Freo in this game.
Hmm.
But back to it, the actual thing. The tackling was absolutely intense. Absolutely hard to move the ball between these two teams. The midfield matchups were a treat, with Young and Brayshaw both having absolutely fantastic impact. And Jordan Sweet, Horn Francis, and Zach Butters were generating a lot of score. Overall, I don't know if the total for the match of 10 hitouts to advantage is an all up lowest, but I think it is actually a credit to how even this game was
Hmm.
in the center. Because, as I said, even if you got the ball, there was going to be a contest, there was going to be a body. Like this was high pressure. There's also a lot of unforced errors. Uh, you get that with sort of the elimination feel for Frio. And Port seemed like they really wanted to take on this pressure and challenge, but couldn't find consistent ways to get it done evenly. And I was honestly very surprised that they were up at halftime. It really felt like Port were just capitalizing in all the right moments, whether it be a few dodgy free kicks, whether it be just like a random inside 50 that they got. As I said, for all of Frio's first quarter dominance, they would end up a tiny bit behind. In the second half, Port came out firing. The door would be open still, with their only bad period of accuracy coming in this quarter. They kicked 3 goals, 5 in the third.
Hmm.
And yeah, it really set up to, Freo were lucky not to have Port come away. The quarter ends. Like there was a lot in the quarter, but you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't the most exciting quarter in terms of overall feel. But to open the last quarter, Freo got the first goal, and after a third quarter break of a bit of arm wrestling, putting it to a one possession game and having finals in reach. And it looked like the game could go either way. However, one thing that would sting for Freo fans is the difference that would come between the two teams 10 minutes into the last quarter, as Willie Junior Rioli, who was quiet all day, was able to get 2 clutch goals late, giving Port the late buffer, while on the other half of the ground, Sonny Walters would probably sum up what would be the small forward game for Freo, as he had the case of the fumbles, as did others, as he sort of fumbled a couple of shots that were reasonably directly out. It just seemed like Port were making all those sort of shots from general play. And as I said, Freo just sort of, I hate to say it, fumbled the game away. And despite the intensity of the crowd was phenomenal. They were booing everything. It felt like an Eagles crowd at times. But it was all in good spirit.
Oh yeah, of course, of course.
Mostly. There would have been some, you know, uh, dregs of the fans, but yeah, always is. Um, but yeah, honestly, if again, a lot of players were phenomenal. Uh, I mentioned a bad forward half. Switter was the exception to this. He was absolutely phenomenal, but it just wasn't up to snuff against a very solid defensive unit that would struggle to score enough today for a bit flat of the 8. They would lose 9-13, 67 to 13-9, 87. We have a mirrored scoreline. So yeah, even scoring shots, Port just able to convert. Pretty much the tale of the game.
It
Um,
kind of sums up both of their seasons really as well.
I wouldn't say both. Like, Port
Oh,
was
it definitely
shocking
sums up
early in the
Freo's.
season in
For sure it sums up
conversion. Yeah,
Freo's.
it sums up Frio's. Yeah. Look, I'll say it sums up Port's back half, like converting in all the right moments.
Mm.
You know, you don't win 5 in a row without doing it, especially against the quality of opposition.
Yeah.
But we'll go to the individual performance for now. I don't know whether this is plus or minus for Freo fans, but in this 5-loss period, I still reckon Young, Sarong, or Brayshaw would probably poll a Brownlow vote in any one of those. They'll feature.
I agree with that, actually. I think all three of them have stood out massively despite the losses.
Yeah. Well, they've at least got fairly reasonable coaches votes. I think at least they would have one featuring over 5. I only lightly track it. But yeah. So for me, the standout midfielder, Baby Brayshaw, 33 disposals, 15 contested possessions, 12 ground ball gets. Absolutely huge in this game because there was a lot of ball to win. 5 clearances, 5 intercepts, 7 tackles. He played a tandem game with Hayden Young, only 19 disposals, 10 score involvements, 3 being goal assists. Everything he touches turned to gold. Much like the man I mentioned before, Sam Switkowski, he had an all-round complete game, 22 disposals with half contested, 3 tackles inside 50, 12 score involvements, and a goal. Honestly, I was watching him, I was like, man, like, Sam Switkowski, like, if he had a few more possessions, he would have been great, but turns out there was a few more than I thought he had, so he was in the, it was very noticeable, his game, even from the ground. And I should say at this point, it's very hard for me to judge individual performances because my eyesight is shocking. I get plays mixed up. So many. I had to turn to my dad and ask, "Oh, was that like specific player?" But yeah, so a lot of this is help from a bit of post game analysis. But yeah, I'll also say Ryan probably in terms of intercept had his best pierceless game. He had 10 intercepts, 21 disposals, and was helped with both Cox and Draper having a bit of a redeem week. Port scored 87, but I think in terms of preventing set shots, Freo did very well. When the ball got to ground, they still struggled a bit, but at least they had one half of that firing. But in terms of the Port players, certified pest Zach Butters and certified bull Ollie Wines were fantastic. They had combined 32 possessions contested, combined 12 clearances, and combined 26 ground ball gets. They provided a lot of the muscle work for Port. And Horn Francis, he just wanted to score whenever he got the ball. He got 2 goal 1, 8 score involvements, and his impact was pretty huge when he was in the game. He'll be absolutely key for finals because we got enough ball winners, but his X factor is pretty key. And there's also a few low-key stats that I think brought it all together for Port. Logan Evans, the mid-round.
I'm actually very glad you mentioned Logan Evans because he also picked up the Rising Star.
Oh, okay. He was absolutely fantastic. 22 possessions, did not muck around with this thing called handballing. They were all kicks. 631 metres gained, 78% efficiency. He only had 5 intercepts, but he was playing that higher role, sort of making up for the loss of Houston and Farrell, who would get injured in this game. I'll mention that a bit more later. Jace Burgoyne also saw a lot of decent play. He was on the outside, but he was playing so aggressively. He chose to chop the ball off. He had 7 intercepts, and he was trying to create a lot of Port's most inventive plays at the Knights, and he had a lot of pressure acts. And finally, Brandon Zerk-Thatcher. He was claimed to be one of the worst one-on-one defenders in the competition when he left the Dons. But in this system, he looked absolutely key. 5 intercept marks, kept Amos to 1 goal, 1 mark, 5 possessions. He had one of the best shutdown games of his career so far. I cannot state how much, it'll be a pain for the Dons, but I definitely think that the Dons was not the fit for Brandon Zerk-Thatcher more than Brandon Zerk-Thatcher was a bad player. I think his pickup is absolutely fantastic for Port. So credit, as I said, earlier in the season, they were playing too tall. I didn't think there was any bad defensive efforts. It's just the system that they were playing weren't too good, but they've seemed to settle it all out.
Yep.
And to wrap it all up, Drizzy Driscoll, phenomenal early, solid late. Jordan Sweet, still playing a bit injured, put a fantastic performance. Got to be hard to drop in for Soldo. I would want to keep Sweet personally. I know you might have differing opinions, but
No, I just find it really funny because Soldo left Richmond to play the number one ruck role because he wasn't going to get it over Nankervis. And
yeah,
now he's not even going to get it over Sweet.
yeah, it could be back-to-back trades for him, honestly. But we'll see what he wants to do. Look, maybe they'll figure it out. But, depends what happens in the off-season. That's still far away. They've still got football to play in between.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of other solid performers, Bergman, Burton, Chapman, Chapman being for the Fremantle, obviously, all had fantastic games. Again, just heartbreak for Freo fans. I do have a graphic. I'm not sure if Blaze wants to show it.
No, we can bring it up now. Because I did actually have it up.
This is 4 losses. This is 4 losses in a row with just over 10-point margin, with this game by far being the worst. I think JLo said it best when they said they are a flawed team, but not necessarily a bad team. And in the long stretch of the season, having no forward line consistency, it sort of broke them when Pearce went down and their elite defense turned a bit soft.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can see from the graphic, unfortunately for Freo, this is one of the worst final season collapses in recent memories, losing 4 of their last games. Sorry, when I say collapse, I mean it's the most consecutive losses while missing the finals by only 1 or fewer games.
Yes.
So, as you can see in this graphic, Melbourne, 1995. I was 1 year old. I can't tell you anything about that. Same with Geelong, 2002. Fremantle, 1997. Unfortunately, it seems they're on the list twice with Melbourne. And Geelong, 2002. But the one you got to mention, Carlton 2022, how much of a swinging doors this season is, because Carlton, they would have been the team, it wouldn't have been losses in a row, but they would have been the team to heartbreakingly miss out on finals.
Yep.
After having this happen 2 years earlier. They just get in. They get a reprieve. Fremantle, as you can see there, -20 against Port, -9 against GWS, -11. These are margins, of course, against Geelong. And, of course, the highlight of that being the 1 point loss against Freo. But what you see around it, finals, 40 points to make it. Melbourne get 36. Finals, 48 to make it. Carlton get 48. 44, 44, 42. 52 points to make it in this finals. Lowest percent being 110. Fremantle miss out on 50 points with a percentage of 111.91. This is such an aberration and should not take away from such a good year from Fremantle. But as I said, they've just got some list deficiencies, but they're so young. They are so young. And, as I said, I think overall in this season, we'll talk about a bit later. They were fantastic. In terms of this game a bit more, Amos, very good kid. He's still got some growth. The hype pre-season probably went a bit more than his actual performance. But he'll learn from this. He'll continue to grow as a key forward. He just needs to get a bit more involved when he's a bit quiet. Sonny Walters, a great servant to the club. But I feel like he's given all he's gotten to give to the club. I never like pushing retirements, but I think that this is the logical conclusion to his career. If he does stay on in Freo, I'd like to see it as a forward coaching assistant, because he has an absolutely brilliant forward mind. We'll talk about it if he does retire, but he led Freo's goal kicking when they had absolutely no one there. But in terms of realistically now, I think it's a time to move on. Glitter, I said, is great, but he's not the forward pressure player that Schultz was. He's a higher player distributing. And as I said, he was absolutely fantastic in that game. In terms of what they needed that game, they just need another need for that. Young, terrific in the midfield. Sorry, I'm just talking about Freo in general when I say Young. I didn't mean Hayden Young.
That's right.
But as I said, respectable backline core, absolutely foundations of a good team. They're just looking to fill those spots. And those spots are probably what made them miss out on finals this year.
Yeah.
We'll finish that up for Freo. They had heartbreak. And I will say, personally as a fan, leaving the stadium to not get any abuse from any opposition people. I got a few Freo fans, chuckling, a few glances, but, absolutely fine. And, like on the train, it was just like one that was like, oh, chin up, Freo fans. There's always next year and the year after and the year after. So they do have a sense of humour. They are one of the most self-aware fan bases in the league. I absolutely love Freo fans. But, as I said, not this year. As for the team that's going on to finals, as for Port, they did not need this win, but they played as if it was their duty to get this. And if they, lose the first round, or optimistically, in my opinion, find themselves at the big dance, they will draw from this game because this was a tough away win without a few of their first selection options at the table. Like, as I said, this was definitely a finals pressure game. They stood up. Absolutely great for Port fans. As I said, we've seen this all before from Port. But the difference between other seasons and this season's is obviously they finished the season strong. They come into the final series with a 6-game win streak, 7 of their last 8 wins, with their only loss being against the Gold Coast. I will say that the game before that, 7 of 9, was the game they got thrashed by Brisbane. So I'll put a tiny quell on it. But all that being said, it leads to only 3 teams going into this final season as we wrap up regular season talk with a 3+ win game streak, the others being Hawthorn and Sydney. So despite this all being a moot point, if they lose next week, they will at least set themselves up to be legitimate fancies. After making up the numbers when they were, as they were in the top 4 earlier, they didn't look that hot. And then they dropped out the 8, despite having a 10-2 record, I will say, as late as round 18. So, again, if you want to highlight how crazy this season was, again, 18 was 6 rounds ago.
Yeah.
Second on the ladder was 9th 6 rounds ago.
That
just
crazy.
Doesn't happen. I know. So, and Brisbane almost made the top 4, starting with a 1-5 record. So
the fact that Hawthorn made the 8 with an 0-5 record.
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, this season's so crazy, and I feel like this game capped off quite the crazy season. Obviously, a lot of heartbreak for Freo fans. Again, I'll say chin up, but in a less sarcastic way, because they've got a lot to build on.
Absolutely.
I was a bit more skeptical at the start of the season. Despite missing, they've instilled a lot of belief in me. And as I said, look, I may be a homer, I may be a Port supporter, but I definitely get a feeling around fans that this season might actually just be slightly better than any other opportunities we've had under Ken Hinkley. Hopefully that remains true, but look, you're never going into a final thinking you're going to win it. You always have the doubts in your mind, so we'll see what happens then.
Yeah, completely agree. I don't think I really need to add any more in terms of both Freo or Port Adelaide. I think you summed them both up pretty accurately. So I might just move on to the MRO, because one actually came in that's going to be very, very important for the finals. So obviously we'll start with Cotty Pickett. We'll miss the first 3 matches of the 2025 season after a high bump on Darcy Moore. He elected to bump. He had no idea that Darcy Moore was going to drop the knee to go for the ball. He was trying to make a contest for the ball, and unfortunately collected Moore's head. Again, concussion was the outcome, so it's a fair assessment of that, because they always assess based on the injury rather than the actual act itself. It's a weird
Yeah,
system,
I will
and I'm
say,
still not really a fan of it, but it is what it is. 3 matches, I think, is
yeah,
fair. So,
I think in this case it's sort of like he got what was coming.
yeah.
Not more obviously. He didn't deserve to get hit in the
No,
head. I
absolutely
meant
not.
Pickett. It, known throughout the years for flinging elbows, he's really got to get that sorted out in this game because he's a fairly important player for Melbourne.
He is.
A bit up and down, but if you're flinging elbows and missing a couple of weeks, for a few parts of the season, you're not going to do your form any good. So,
No, absolutely not.
yeah.
And then the second one that just came in, super, super important, is Matt Owies will miss the elimination final against Brisbane for rough conduct against Jack Higgins. I do not
Ooh.
know where in the game this happened, but apparently it was reported, and apparently it was that bad enough to miss one match, and that's insanely important for Carlton. I don't know if they're going to challenge it. I haven't seen it. I actually have no idea what it actually
Yeah.
was. I might try and have a look at it a bit later because I can't show it on the podcast for copyright reasons. But yeah, that's rough. Considering what Carlton are already missing, that's not good at all.
Yeah, absolutely. No, honestly, as I said, yeah, it's not so much that always is the best player going around, but if Carlton are forced to play that small bowl forward line, like always is very key because he's by far the most, yeah, I'll say by far the most
I'd say at least
consistent
top
small
3.
forward.
But
Um,
he puts up the numbers.
yeah, well, as I said, for Carlton, not in the league.
Oh yeah, obviously.
Yeah. But yeah, so very important for their structure and the pressure is able to bring, especially again, if they don't get a player like the other one that I like to put in, name escaping me, David Cunningham.
Yes.
His shoulder's out for the season. He's the other pressure player. So, when you take those two, when you play a small ball, it's very hard to keep the ball locked inside your 50 if you don't have those type of players. And he is going to be missing, whether it be frivolously or, I don't know, maybe they'll appeal and try and get him back. But, as it stands now, it's definitely a big blow.
Absolutely. All right, let's take one last look at the ladder with every round officially over and done with. This is where the teams stand. So as we're already aware, Sydney, Port Adelaide, Geelong, GWS Giants, Brisbane, Western Bulldogs, Hawthorn, and Carlton are in the top 8. But as for everyone below, Collingwood moved up into 9th position with their win over Melbourne. Fremantle dropped to 10th and unfortunately did not move due to their loss to Port Adelaide. Essendon stayed firmly in 11th position. St Kilda managed to move up into 12th, and jumping the Gold Coast Suns and the Melbourne Demons, with them being 13th and 14th respectively. And then obviously the bottom 4 didn't change at all. Adelaide at 15th with 34 premiership points. West Coast Eagles with 20, North Melbourne with 12, and Richmond with 8. However, as you can see, Richmond do have a higher percentage than North Melbourne, so it really was extremely slim in terms of that number 1 draft pick.
You know what they say, percentage is a better indicator of form. So can you really say Richmond finished on the bottom of the ladder, Blaze?
True. Well, I mean, in terms
No,
of what our draft hand is going to look like, yes, it does actually matter.
Yeah, well, as I said, you get the number 1 pick and you get to weirdly claim that you're a slightly better team. Obviously, apples and oranges, yes. I don't know. I think Richmond had a better season. But yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Actually, I do agree with that. That's purely because we played up a lot closer to a lot of high tier teams compared to what North Melbourne did.
Yeah, exactly. But again, we'll probably talk about that.
We also beat, the number 1 team at the comp at the time, which was Sydney. So we can still hold that high.
Yeah. Swan Slayers.
All right, let's jump over to the final bit of information that we have for you, and that's week 1 of the finals. So dates have been announced, teams have been announced, as we already knew. So this is what the layout currently stands at. Port Adelaide and Geelong, Thursday, the 5th of September, 7:10 at the Adelaide Oval. Personally, I think there should have been the Saturday afternoon game, I'm going to be honest. And the Battle for the Bridge should have been the Thursday night. But That's the AFL's ruling. We can't do anything about that. Second elimination final is the Doggies and the Hawks, Friday night, 6th of September, 7:40 at the MCG.
Talking about a bit of controversy there as well.
Oh, yeah. The Dogs aren't very happy with this.
Yeah, clashes with their AFLW debut at Winton Oval. So, yeah, as said, rightly so, a bit pissed because Sydney actually wanted the Friday night spot. So they could have organised it the other way, but not to be. I don't know how AFL scheduling works. It just randomly decides to screw over clubs on a coin flip.
This also surprisingly screws up. It pretty much screws up every team in a sense, because again for Port Adelaide Geelong, most Geelong supporters are like regional, so that's impossible. It's nigh impossible for them to actually be able to get to that game.
Go to the game, then get back.
And then for the Doggies
to go to work the next day. Yeah,
and then for the Doggies, it screws them up because of their AFLW clash. For Sydney and GWS, this would have been a massive game for New South Wales football, and it should have been played in a better primetime slot. And then
highlighted on its own. Yeah.
But again, as it currently stands, that's Saturday, 7th of September, 3:20 at the SCG. And then for Brisbane and Carlton, which is the Saturday night 7:30 game at the Gabba, there's like a Brisbane run or something going on at the city at the same time, which shuts down most of the major roads in Brisbane. So getting to this game is already going to be a nightmare.
Yeah, and it's the most likely one to be a blowout. Like, let's be honest.
Well, looking at
we'll wait and see to what happens on the list. But, it's going to be a tough ask.
Yeah, we'll talk about that next week.
If they don't get at least, 11 players back, so...
Yeah, so, if we were going to actually structure how this was going to play out, I would have put maybe Brisbane Carlton on the Thursday night. Or actually, no, I would have put Sydney GWS Thursday night. Brisbane Carlton Friday night. Then Doggies Hawks Saturday afternoon. And then probably Port Geelong Saturday night.
Port Geelong, yeah.
Yeah. I think that would have been or Port Geelong Friday night. Either way, it doesn't. As long as that would have been a lot fairer of a structure.
Well, again, in terms of away fans for Geelong, I think Saturday night would be fair because, as I said, regional, you have to travel to get to the airport and then you have to fly in. You want some time to do that. Look, there'll be dedicated fans. They'll be able to do that. But as I said, I'd love to see Port fans massively outnumber them. You do want to have a chance for opposition teams to travel, experience your state, look at your ground, and hopefully have an exciting, but for me, Port win. But yeah, as I said, it wouldn't be the AFL
without some sort of weird scheduling.
Do some sort of weird scheduling. So it is what it is. But we will go sink our teeth into those matchups next week.
Yes.
Or wait.
Yeah, it'll be next week.
Week after. Yeah, next week.
Yeah, because the get matches are played that weekend off.
Yeah. Cool.
Granted, obviously we won't know actual teams because that'll be announced way after we record the podcast. However, I think for the most part we can probably guess what their best 22 for the games going in would be. Of course, we'll find out the Matt Owie situation and Carlton's injuries in by that time, hopefully, because we'll get an injury report sometime this week. And that we'll be able to judge, at least according to that, what team structure will look like, especially for them. But overall, it's going to be a very interesting first week, and we will 100% go more in depth next week.
Yeah, exactly. Look, honestly, a lot's being said about the break, but personally, I'm actually looking forward to this week off, only because it gives us a bit of a break to do some more, less stat-intensive. Me stat-intensive. I dig too much into stats, but just a bit more. It'll just be like
a more general overview of the season.
Yeah, general overview of the bottom 8 teams, and then obviously we put our focus into the matchups. I did see something that just came out, which we'll probably talk about, the All Australian squad. Won't talk about it now, but that's just come out.
Is that the 40? The 40-man squad?
The 40, yeah.
Okay,
So
cool.
that'll be refined when we get it then next week. So if you're listening to the podcast and you haven't checked it out, check it out. I've had a brief overview. And yeah, players got in. Some didn't. Um, yep.
I just want one player.
Yeah.
I just want one player in that 40 at the minimum. That's all I want.
Oh,
Sherry.
I think they did. Yeah, okay. Cherry. I thought you meant in Richmond terms.
Oh, no. The only one nominated was Boston, and I wasn't expecting him to get in.
Yeah,
so,
okay.
No, I only wanted Sherry. As long as
so-
Sherry's in that 40, I'm good.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So I'm probably gonna have a look at the AFLW games. I might even go down to I think Swan Districts, my WAFL supporting team of choice. Have a home game, so I might go down to that since I have the week off. But otherwise, yeah, I'm just looking forward to still thinking, having it on the burner, getting that excitement, and just building it up slowly. But
Absolutely. As for
taking a
me,
breath.
I don't have as much of an interest as in the AFLW. However, I have been talking to someone who hasn't experienced the AFL at all, and we both kind of want to experience something new together. So we both might go to the AFLW and learn something.
Nice.
And I definitely want to incorporate that into the podcast during the off season, because I think we can definitely create some good content out of that. So we will let you know what our off season plans are in the coming weeks. But as for now, I think that will do us. So,
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for listening this week, or watching if you're watching on the YouTubes. Let us know your thoughts both on this week 1 structure, and agree with us that it's not good, and also your overall thoughts of the season as a whole. Again, also your all Australian teams. We did cover that last week, but if you want to still send them to us, we would definitely love to take a look. Of course, go check out our socials. Finals popping, so it's gonna be probably a bit busy on the socials. I'm gonna try and be more active with that. My personal stuff, I'm streaming 3 days a week. I didn't stream this weekend because I went out. I touched some grass. It was nice. It's a good time. But of course, Tuesdays and Wednesdays are my normal streaming days during the week, so be sure to come and check that out, and come hang out. And yeah, thank you all again, and we will hopefully see you all next week for episode 28. Catch you then.